Welcome to this evening's meeting. We're going to start off with our newly named public comment period. In case you didn't know, we changed the rules of decorum today, and I want to thank Jonathan Melton and Patrick Buffkin for working on that with our city attorney. I think what we came up with is very doable. I have a few comments I want to make just about that. You should have all gotten a handout with the new rules, so hopefully you have that and have read it and understand it. But just a couple of points. Public comment portion of the agenda is a time for the public to speak to council and bring issues and concerns to our attention. We think that's a really important part of governance. However, the law also allows the council to adopt these rules of decorum for this part of the agenda. That's because while council wants to hear from the public, there's a corresponding duty of the speaker to be civil and respectful in bringing forward their statements, issues, or concerns. This is not an opportunity to personally attack staff, ridicule them, or embarrass them. Yet I've seen this happen time and time again during the 10 years I served on the council. So these new rules specifically ask you to refrain from doing that and just to be respectful. And I'd like to just call out one point. Number 5 rule, speakers shall refrain from personal attacks and or threats directed towards city staff or members of the public. That means don't attack people in the audience. Audience, please don't attack the speakers, jeer them, cheer them. There's no place for that. We are trying to restore civility in politics. I would ask everyone to take the rules of decorum seriously and present their issues and concerns with respect. We intend to do the same. So, we'll now have our first speaker come up, Brenda Weeks. If you would state your name and address, and a reminder, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Brenda Weeks, and I live in Ravenhurst Drive in Raleigh, North Carolina. Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members, for the opportunity to speak. The topic is deforestation in the city of Oaks. And I guess I need to click. Okay. So just to give you an idea, these stats that are presented show last year's single-family dwelling permits, how many were issued, the square footage. As you can see, the average is pretty high, and the construction cost, which appears to be contrary to affordable housing goals. Several permits are available, but the one thing that I noticed in my research is that there are no required site visits until the foundation footing inspection. So in the event you have a wooded lot, that lot could be completely cleared, and probably will be, before you have a chance to, anyone ever comes out and sees that. So this is just an example of some lots in my neighborhood where 2 houses were taken out and now 3 are being built. And it's happening throughout Raleigh, and it's creating hot spots. And these are some of the effects: loss of canopy, loss of understory, and a larger structure footprint. So I'm asking you to consider amending UDO Article 9.1 and the UDO wherever it is possible, that instead of just having tree conservation, that we would have a tree preservation policy or code, and that the city would identify some species of concern, such as oaks, and try to keep those mature trees from being cut down. So these are just some of the ideas that I had, was maybe require site analysis on lots and issue tree permits. They would have to do a drawing and sketch out the types of trees the larger trees that are on the lot, based on some sort of size, circumference. I put 9 inches in diameter. And that's it. I'm just hoping that you guys will think about what's happening to our city as large houses are being built all the way to the setbacks, and there's no room to leave any mature trees or to plant a tree that can be mature and provide overstory. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Weeks. Thank you for sticking to the 3 minutes, too. Good to see you. Do we have any remarks from staff on this?
No, we didn't have the presentation until recently.
Okay.
So we can certainly provide a report commenting to the request, and then the council could decide how you wish to handle it. So we would suggest a follow-up report, and then you can decide if you want to refer it or handle it.
Okay, thank you. That's what we'll do. Next on our list is Ashton Smith.
Good evening, Mayor Baldwin and council members. I am Ashton Smith at 106 Hatfield, and I'm here before you today on behalf of a group of citizens and would like to share with you a letter that we have collectively written. I'm going to give some copies to the city clerk. As you know, Raleigh's elected officials are tasked with defining a vision for an ever-changing civic landscape. Decisive, innovative leadership requires a political system that reinforces engagement across the entirety of our city, the capacity to execute a shared vision, and the opportunity for participation by all. These dynamics should be reinforced at every level and every step of our civic process. So in the spirit of fostering this environment, we respectfully request that the council form a study group to thoroughly and thoughtfully review the following items. 1, changing council terms from 2-year terms to 4-year terms, in line with many of our peer cities and similarly situated offices, including the Wake County Commission and School Board. If a shift to a 4-year term is recommended, we also recommend studying whether a staggered election should be considered. Item number 2, revising the compensation of municipal elected officials to match comparable cities with part-time elected officials who are also in a council management government structure, as a part of an effort to expand the opportunity for more Raleigh residents to seek elected office. And 3rd, to develop a set of proposals aimed at increasing voter information, voter engagement, and voter turnout in municipal elections. We believe that a narrow focus on these 3 topics creates a foundation for future considerations and reflects the criticality of this set of issues. As Councilmember Cox, in fact, noted earlier, these issues reflect interest to a number of citizens across the city. This process ought to be executed with intentionality and to engage the public and to arrive at the best conclusion for our city, given the goals of our populace, the dynamics of our peer cities, and our position as a leading city in our region and state. This is a necessary foundation for our future, and we ask that it be met with urgency and priority. So we respectfully request that the council establish the study group, assign staff support, and set a target for delivering a narrow set of recommendations within 90 days of the study group's formation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ashton, who is with you this evening?
Yeah, undersigned, you guys want to wave or something? We've got Eric Braun, Adrian Cole, Tyler Kraft, Carlton Midyett, Michael Sandman, myself, Orage Quarles, and Joe Whitehouse.
Okay.
So we've got several of them in the audience, but some couldn't make it tonight.
Okay. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Mayor, I obviously enthusiastically support this, and the only thing I would add is that we add to this the possibility of increasing the number of members of council as an extra item.
Let's look at that when the census comes through,
Yeah.
because we don't know what that looks like yet. So my recommendation would be to move forward on these recommendations. Once the census is completed, we can look at what that looks like. But that would be premature to do at this point. But we hear
Right,
you,
but-
Mr. Cox.
Yeah, certainly how the districts would be drawn is premature, but just conceptually in terms of adding more people to council, I think would be beneficial in terms of being able to represent people more equitably throughout the city.
Well, I'm going to ask, and we'll see if there's consensus, for the city attorney to work with us to form a study group on this. I would suggest a task force. That would be for 6 months, whatever, but not in perpetuity, something that we could get done quickly. If you could come back to us, I know that there were already some preliminary work done, because that was my very last meeting on council when I asked for a study on the first two issues. So if we could take a look at that and come back to us with some recommendations, we would appreciate it. And also how we would form this task force. You know, should there be applications accepted? Could we, who's going to name them? Come back with some suggestions for us.
Okay, we'll do that.
Okay. Consensus from the council to move in that direction? Okay, thank you. Okay. Second, let's see. I'm missing. Does everybody have Curtis Johnson next? No, Mary Ruth Dana. Mary Ruth, if you'd come up, please.
Good evening, Councilman and Mayor Baldwin. My name is Mary Ruth Dana, and I live at 2714 Everett Avenue. I have been a resident of Raleigh for 37 years. Strong Towns Org is a 501c3 organization begun by a professional engineer and land use planner with 2 decades of experience. Strong Towns believes that in order to truly thrive, our cities and towns must do several things. They must value resiliency over efficiency, stop betting on huge, irreversible projects, but rather take small, incremental steps, seeing what we learn before moving forward. Build based on how our places actually work and what our neighbors actually need. Stop obsessing about future growth and start obsessing about our current finances. I would like to take this opportunity to loan each member of the council a book written by the founder of Strong Towns, Chuck Marone. I understand there have been discussions on how to facilitate greater engagement on the part of the citizens around key ideas and topics as it pertains to growth. I would strongly suggest that the mayor and city council encourage the citizens themselves to read this book and then invite the author for a citywide book discussion to see what Raleigh is doing right and where Raleigh could improve. This approach would allow the various growth issues, the pros and cons of decisions and choices that need to be made, to be better understood by a much wider portion of our citizens. This courageous act would bring a much-needed level of coherence and rationality to these issues. We cannot work on solutions if we are ignorant of the actual problems. The decisions made around infrastructure, zoning, bonds, and debt must be managed responsibly. Slow, incremental change has been the most successful approach and has made for resilient cities across the globe and across the millennium. The Opportunity Zone in South Raleigh, adjacent to Dix Park, is the exact sort of neighborhood distorting action that creates the conditions for the rapid transformation that many find so troubling. This book talks about the impact of those types of investments and how it can dislocate a population while also excluding the small investor. 35% of Raleigh's residential property is zoned R4. Perhaps allowing it to be R6 or R8 with permissions for duplexes and triplexes is the kind of broad compromise that would allow for the growth, the missing middle, which we need. And I would sincerely hope any affordable housing bond is paired with meaningful zoning changes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for being here. Just
Books are over there.
thank you. Point
And
of,
it's a loan. You can give them to the library or your staff when you're done.
okay. Most of us read small towns online, just FYI. And I want to ask the city manager something. You know, our urban design group used to do lecture series. What happened with that, and is there an opportunity to revive that or continue that discussion on topics such as these?
Certainly. We also have another lecture series going on simultaneously that is incorporated across the entire organization. But the Urban Design Center has continued to do different lecture series. We can certainly crank that back up if you like and put this on as a potential topic going forward if that's of the interest of council.
If council agrees, let's continue that conversation with the Urban Design Center taking the lead. Do I see consensus?
Is that different than the other lecture series that's ongoing right now that is about quarterly?
We're doing a quarterly lecture series just on general topics
Right.
as opposed to the Urban Design Center was really focused on development. What I would just simply suggest is we'll put it into one of those buckets as an idea.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we good? Okay. Fourth speaker, Curtis Johnson.
Mayor, he has withdrawn from tonight's meeting due to illness and has asked to be placed on the next agenda.
Okay, thank you. Calla Wright. Ms. Wright?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Calla Wright, 613 Cooper Road, Raleigh. I'm here today to discuss the reused wastewater tower, stormwater runoff, and gentrification. The City of Raleigh's only reused wastewater tower is located on a cheap piece of land in a black neighborhood that runs into my backyard. Many of the original members who voted for the reused wastewater tower to be installed are with us today. The reused wastewater tower is elevated on a high piece of land. The stormwater runs down into my backyard, and it stands and have caused soil erosion. There are federal laws and rules that prohibit standing water that is full of bacteria, toxins, and other harmful pollutants from harming our environment. However, nothing has been done to prohibit that problem in the Southeast Raleigh area. The City of Raleigh did not make necessary provisions when constructing the tower to eliminate the toxins, bacteria, stormwater runoff. However, the city did make provisions for the stormwater runoff to drain in front of the property on Sunnybrook. And as a result, I've sent several pictures. My late husband called when he was living the city council who installed the tower to share the concerns. During the close of the year 2019, Councilman Cox requested information on the cost of removing the tower. So where's the integrity, ethics, and the respect for the request for information? I'm also waiting to receive a request for property listing, and I shared that with my district representative during a public meeting. This clearly shows the City of Raleigh devalues the citizens' life and welfare of our black citizens here in Southeast Raleigh with a continued loss of land and gentrification. As we prepare to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday on the 20th, he was a warrior and fought for justice, equal justice, socioeconomic factors for all citizens, particularly the black, low-income citizens. And as we celebrate, have we done our part to make his dream come true? We have much work to do. We have so many citizens here who do not have homes, who are struggling. And so as we celebrate his legacy and what he stood for, each of you need to examine yourselves to see what you have done to help to benefit the life and welfare of all citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Next, we have Octavia Rainey.
Good evening. My name is Octavia Rainey, and I reside at 1516 East Lane Street. I'm here tonight to speak about what happened to me on February the 3rd. On February the 3rd, I was scheduled to speak, and I did speak at City Council. Two people came up to approach me. One, she was either from the mayor's office or the manager's office, and told me that if I called the staff person's name, I would be banned from City Council. Then when I got here at 6:45, the chief of police told me the same thing. So I'm asking, who gave the orders for them to approach me? That's called selective enforcement. I have been speaking before the council, period, since 1973. And that's a long time. And I intend to continue to speak. But you can't silence me from speaking up for my rights. You can't silence me from speaking up for what is right. You had a staff person to call my name to Channel 11 News, but I couldn't come and call his name. He talked about my neighborhood. He talked about me. I'm not over that yet, but yet and still, nothing have been done. You may have done decorum, but you still have not answered. How could a staff person talk about me, talk about my neighborhood, talk about the 1960s? That don't sound like Martin Luther King at all to me. This city has a long way to go, and you're talking about equity. You got a long way to go. And your civil rights speaks for itself. So I am very disappointed, and I will come back in February, in March, in April, in May, every month to speak my constitutional right and to say, I have been before this council since 1973, and this is the baddest that I've ever seen.
And we welcome you to come back every time, Ms. Rainey. And thank you for also following the rules of decorum tonight. Next is Kimberly McTarian, Save Our Sons. Good evening.
Thank you. I'm well. Good evening. My name is Kimberly Mukhtarian. Can you stop the clock? I'm supposed to give my address, right?
Yes, please. And
Okay.
Kimberly, can you
Yes.
speak a little more into the microphone? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay, I do apologize. If they could stop the clock, because I haven't started this at 2:40.
We'll give you a few. Keep going. We're
Okay,
good.
great. Thank you. My name is Dr. Kimberly Mukhtarian, president of Save Our Sons. Address is 4224 Crowfield Drive in Raleigh, District C. My question also is a matter of decorum. And what I need to know for clarity's sake is the policy. Does it state that we can not address both council and staff members or only council? Either way, I would like to have the policy that supports that statement that was made on December the 3rd and the time it was enacted. And the reason being is because we understand as African American citizens that many of the laws that are on the books are very much outdated. Thank you for addressing some of the current ones that you would like to. However, some of the of your policies really impede on our civil rights as well as our First Amendment rights. And given that we've been in your city before we even got here, African Americans have been disenfranchised for 400 years. And it took 400 years for you all to come up to the understanding that we're not property and we should be treated like humans. And we cannot afford for another 400 years or 40 days, even 4 days, to wait to be treated with respect. So when we come before this council and say anything personally, because remember, we vote for you guys individually. We do not vote for you collectively. And we can't even talk to many of the other councils because they do not directly affect us like our own city council person. So please understand that when we address you individually, it's because you made an individual decision with an individual vote that affects us collectively. And when I say that, I don't like to approach you guys as a whole because then that becomes an issue of our young people having to look back at history. And we see pictures today in black and white where we don't know who created the atrocities against us. We can look at a Karen Hinton case and don't know which police officers last year offended us. But it's good to know which staff member, which council member did or did not do his due diligence. And as long as I live, I will do just so. I will teach my children how to address you individually because you came in this world individually and you will leave this world individually. And that is not disrespectful. Let me say this as well.
You have a little more time. I'm not going to cut you off
thank
the
you, Ms.
buzzer
Mary.
because of that.
Thank you, Mary Baldwin. Let me also say this. It is very important to us, with respect for every man, that we address the city council members individually. And you will say my name on this podium, Kimberly. Not Save Our Sons, because Save Our Sons is not all here. You will say Kimberly, and I will respect that. Again, please consider some of your, and that's what diversity training helps, because some of the rules that are on the books affect us totally different.
Thank you, Kimberly.
And I was,
The time is up now. We've extended it, so.
And I thank you. And what I will say in ending, Mayor Baldwin, is that the equity have been stolen out of our community in so much. That's where our 31 murders come from. When we're not able to speak out and we're silenced, we swallow that. We swallow that in mental anguish. And there is not enough pills at GlaxoSmithKline that can help us. So I welcome just plain humanity. It don't cost you nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Okay, now we have Kathy Firth. Please state your name and address.
The next two have been withdrawn.
The next two, they are also ill, right?
Kathy and Peter.
Okay. Rolanda Bird. Rolanda? There you are.
Rolanda Bird, 6156 St. Giles Street, Apartment G. Good afternoon. I'm here today to show the new members and remind old members that Raleigh PAC started this fight for a community oversight board and will continue until the board we've been asking for since 2016 with disciplinary, investigatory, and subpoena power is in effect in our city. This video will show our supporters and members who've come along with us and the silence that we've received from our elected officials will not work for us anymore. This Raleigh history is important for new members to know this. This city is not a blank slate anymore. I'm sorry. It's well past time for any more meetings, questions, or stalling. It's time to make a decision to protect Raleigh residents as well as our law enforcement. We come from all parts of the city, from all backgrounds and religions who have come before you. So please stop with the angry group of black folks title that you place on my organization. And I'm going to start the video now.
Ms. Bird, how long is the video?
We have 4 different speakers coming in, and it's going to be paused for each one of us.
Okay, so you're going to do
yes, I'm going to do part of it.
The remainder of yours, your
Yes, ma'am.
time, and then the video will be played for the next 3
Yes, ma'am.
speakers. So those speakers in order are, well, just have them come up, give their name.
There's
start the
Jessica
video.
Turner, Serena Johnson, Jeff Land, myself, and Ivana Gonzalez.
Okay, thank you.
Who's controlling this? Because I didn't do anything. Okay, can you press play? Thank you.
It's magic.
Accountability and transparency.
Lovely that you would consider making policies that are actually informed by the folks who are being affected by that, which is definitely what the Community Oversight Board will continue to
ask for. Community Oversight Board with power. I'm here in support of the police accountability policy recommendations that have been presented to the City Council.
I hope that you understand we need to bridge the gap between the community and the police.
This mother is standing here before you right now holding a picture of her slain child for no other reason than he was evading arrest. That is not a death sentence. And if that is how we're going to be being policed and you do not address that, then you're complicit.
I'm the mother of Ikeal Dinkins, the young man that was shot and killed by the Raleigh Police Department. Here today to talk about the recommendations regarding the implementation of body cameras. I believe that they should be a tool to protect community members as well as officers. If there had been cameras, we would know exactly what happened to him instead of just the officer's word against the public. Putting the power in the hands of the community to hold police accountable and building trust between community and police.
An abuse victim reports that her abuser happens to be a police officer. As you may imagine, it's difficult to report that kind of abuse to the police.
Since the last time we were here, another young man's life was taken. We are here to say his name loud. Jaquan Terry demonstrates Raleigh leadership by putting out a statement of resolution supporting the Community Oversight Board with the policy to discipline, subpoena, and investigate. Passing the ordinance to de-emphasize biased marijuana enforcement. The body cameras without policy are surveillance and a waste of taxpayer money. We will not be distracted by false solutions, dialogues with individual officers, park cleanups, and diversity initiatives that change the face but not the system. We take our stories. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Byrd, just so you know, on February 4th, during the 1 p.m. meeting, the staff report on the community engagement will be coming back to us and with recommendations, and we hope to take action at that time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next person is either Jeffrey Land, Jessica Turner, or Ivana Gonzalez. If you could come up and give your name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Jessica Turner. I live at 10810 Heather Meadow Lane, apartment 105, Raleigh, North Carolina.
Okay, we'll continue the video. Thank you.
And the code, hard numbers, or how black and brown people are being disproportionately stopped, searched, and even killed have not moved you to support the Community Oversight Board and body camera policies we deserve.
Asked for a Community Oversight Board and been buried beneath red tape.
Why haven't, after we've been here a year, that you guys have not made a decision? You guys don't even have the power to do anything. All we asking for is a recommendation. A recommendation. Say, yes, we're going to recommend it, or no, we're not going to do nothing.
Get those body cameras off the streets until there's a stern policy in Raleigh. Create a strong system of checks and balance in the Raleigh policing by supporting Community Oversight Board.
I'm here to talk about the body cam policy, to include the proper equipment such as the sensors that will automatically activate the cameras.
We need a body camera policy that reflects the needs of this community.
First step toward accountability is Community Oversight Board. We will first need to garner the support of the Wake County delegation to the General Assembly and then the local acts committee. Repeatedly, our local delegation has made it clear that to move forward, they are looking to our city council to demonstrate their commitment to this project for equity.
I'm committed to reviewing our policies with a focus on equity.
A Community Oversight Board with subpoena, investigation, and disciplinary power is not about the intention of any single officer. It's about accepting the demonstrated facts that police officers, as a collective, use skin color as a predictor for criminality.
I'm here tonight to support the Police Accountability Community Task Force.
Autonomous Police Oversight Board, necessary as this may be.
Support. Can we get a little volume?
I ask you to endorse the Akil-Denkins resolution and publicly state the City Council's intention to create a Community Oversight Board with the power to subpoena, discipline, and investigate police.
Need more conversations amongst us as a group for oversight. We cannot depend on the agencies of the state to have our best interests. As you see, we may be mauled to death.
I am the leadership coordinator for Raleigh PAC. Thank you for working closely with us to make some significant improvements to the consent and search form. The form was simplified, understanding that we do have the right to refuse, stop, or consent to search at any time. The document was also translated in Spanish, but the policy unfortunately says that officers should use these forms only when possible in order to cement the gains of the positive transparency that we're going for as we're reducing the consent to searches. That we're requested that RPD amends the consent to search policy to say that all consent to search forms are required for all consent searches. We believe that this direct ask is one of the many dire needs for our community.
And there has been an advancement in body cam technology recently, a holster that automatically triggers a body cam.
Next would be Ivana Gonzalez.
Ivana Gonzalez, oh shoot, I forgot. 2951 Spring Sweet Lane, apartment 12, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27604.
Thank you.
Camera to record whenever a gun is pulled from it. High stakes, fast paced.
Just so you all know, it's the way it was developed. She has as loud as can go on the
We ask
system.
you all to stand
Because
for
each
accountability.
person
The
that you
people of
hear is
Raleigh deserve
different volume
a Community
levels.
Oversight Board with investigatory, disciplinary, and subpoena power.
Mayor McFarland, what will it take for the city of Raleigh to value Black lives?
Kay Crowder, what will it take for the city of Raleigh to value Black lives? Stand for accountability. The people of Raleigh deserve a community oversight board with investigatory, disciplinary, and subpoena power.
I'm here today to speak on all of the injustices that the people of Raleigh have witnessed over the last few years, and to ask you all, and specifically Corey Branch, what will it take for you to step up and side with your people, your neighbors, your voters, your community, with helping us make justice and policing become a statement that we all can believe in?
Nicole Stewart, what will it take for the city of Raleigh to value Black lives? Stand for accountability.
Truth is, we have to start a dialogue about a Citizens Advisory Review Board.
We're asking for the Citizens Advisory Review Board with disciplinary, investigatory, and subpoena power. And you say that you can't do it, we have people down at the General Assembly ready to support us.
Counselors, what will it take for you to value Black and brown lives? When will you stand for accountability instead of just talking about it? The people of Raleigh deserve a community oversight board with real investigatory, disciplinary, and subpoena power.
And with PAC, we've been working on this for the past couple years to get a community oversight board with subpoena power.
And I think the people of color and the Black community, Hispanic community deserve the same rights as white citizens. They're taxpayers. They deserve the same respect, not to be slammed on the ground, disrespected in front of their children, husbands and wives.
So again, I'm here asking you all, to support recommendation for a community oversight board with investigatory, disciplinary, and subpoena power.
Always had the authority to choose to create a community oversight board.
Another thing the city of Raleigh can do is to allocate funding for auto-activated body camera holsters in the fiscal year 2020.
Thank you for your consideration of a strong community oversight board.
As a global human rights organization, Amnesty International advocates for governments to protect the human rights of all persons as defined and treated.
If y'all truly care about making Raleigh a progressive city that reflects a thriving atmosphere in which to live, work, and play, then asking for this as a legislative priority is your next step.
This is my 6-year-old son, Aiden. He has joined the group of 49% of Black males that will have an encounter with police. The question remains, who is policing the police? By your lack of action, you have given RPD a free pass to demonize and expose to deplorable treatment the same Black citizens that you want to take photos with, shake hands with, and
Okay. The last person would be Jeffrey Land.
Serena.
Okay.
Either or. I'm Serena Johnson, 5612 Quitman Trail, Raleigh, and I'm just going to let the rest of the video play. Encouraged to support you. You do not have to deny the rights of citizens you claim you want to represent, just to stay on the good side of RPD.
The board of citizens, and it's us, because we're the ones being affected to be a part of the decisions in changing any policy.
We are calling for this council to take action by making body cameras mandatory for every police officer, as well as requiring mandatory training for officers to learn better tactics to deal with the mentally ill.
That's where we've been meeting for the past couple of years, so something like this doesn't happen. Now, the fact that the body camera was not on is unacceptable. We are no longer here asking for what you guys are going to do. I need answers on what is going to happen today. You guys are the ones who can make the decisions. You can make decisions tonight. To make sure that you commit for the budget of the fiscal year 2020 that you put cameras in place that have auto-activate when an officer draws a weapon from his holster. We also want to make sure that you enforce strict disciplinary actions to officers who fail to comply with these operating instructions that require them to turn their cameras on, and officially recommend a community oversight board with subpoena power, disciplinary power. But for the officers who do not follow the policy, they need to have consequences to those actions, and that only happens with policy change. So, Ms. Stewart, are you going to commit to an oversight board with disciplinary subpoena power for people who are affected by law enforcement officers? Yes or no?
I can tell you that we are looking forward to getting more information from staff at the next meeting.
Now, this is a yes or no question. We don't want to see this. We've been getting this feedback from you guys all year long. And you, Mr. Stevenson, yes or no?
I definitely believe we should have an oversight board.
I have 23 seconds, and you guys are using my time right now, so I need to have yes or no. Corey Branch.
We will receive the information next meeting.
And Ms. Kay Crowder.
I believe we need some kind of oversight board.
Dale?
Yes, I also believe we need some kind of oversight board.
A community oversight board with power to investigate, subpoena, and discipline will provide for independent investigations and important due process for police.
And I am speaking in favor of establishing a community oversight board with the power to investigate, subpoena, and discipline.
I'm here to urge council support and implementation of a police community oversight board as well, with the power to subpoena, investigate, and discipline.
Okay, thank you. We also had speaking on this topic Jeffrey Land. You're going to waive your time? Okay, thank you. Next on the list is Kathina Samuels.
Happy New Year, Raleigh City Council members. Katina Samuels, 3300 Idlewood Village Drive. Choices, the baby's choice. We constantly make choices every minute. We choose to get out of bed or we choose to sleep in. We choose to walk, run, or be pushed and fall down. Choices. Abortion is said to be a woman's right to choose. Really? Is it a woman's right to choose to abort an unborn child yet in her mother's womb? Who gives her that right or choice to decide if an innocent child deserves the death penalty? Should we not finish the sentence and declare that in the U.S., particularly in this great city of Raleigh, a woman has been granted the choice to murder her own child? Why do we not reference God? The Bible states in Genesis 2:7 and Jeremiah 1:4 respectively that God is the only one that breathed the breath of life into a person and knew us before we were conceived in our mother's womb. Abortions, according to cited references, there were approximately 30,000 abortions performed in North Carolina in 2018, and this doesn't even include the number of abortions performed in North Carolina and other states. North Carolina has an abortion rate of 14.6%, approximately 29,500 abortions across the state annually. Raleigh is going to be judged for this child sacrifice and massacre at the rate even more compared to New York, which triples our population, and the overall national rate of 13.5%. A baby's choice, not a baby's voice, not a mother's choice. I'm a mother of a baby born at 24 weeks gestation, and I was told by doctors that if my son lived, he'd be mentally and physically deformed. Now, 17 years later, my son is totally healthy, an AB honor roll student, tall, dark, and handsome. It is overly concerning to me that black women, 27 out of 1,000 of our babies are aborted, compared to 10 out of 1,000 for white women. Psalms 139:13 and 14 proclaims, God formed our inward parts and knitted us together while we were yet in our mother's womb, and we are fearfully and wonderfully made. What about the baby's choice? Can you not imagine hearing the laughter and seeing the unsuspecting baby in the womb of a mother contemplating abortion? Shall we just ignore their voice? What about their choice? Raleigh City Council members, what's your choice? Do you choose to agree with the egregious thought that a woman has a right to murder her unborn child? Or we make the choice tonight to agree with the God of the Bible and choose life, even for the unborn in a mother's womb? I implore you, please choose life. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to speak is Dr. Jean Spooner.
And Mayor, if I can, I'd like to speak with anyone that's here with the last speaker. What was your name, ma'am? Great. Anyone that's with you, my name's Mr. Martin. Could I speak with you guys in the lobby?
We'll excuse you.
Fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jean.
Dr. Spooner, please begin.
I'm Dr. Jean Spooner, Chair of the Umstead Coalition, 2401 Trinity Farms Road. I'm here today to ask the City of Raleigh to take the following actions. File an amicus brief, a friend of the court, to support our lawsuit appeal and defend your city rights against a proposed 400-foot rock quarry on your property next to Umstead State Park. You're a deeded property owner and should have a say in whether your property can be destroyed for a private rock mine next to Umstead State Park. Also, ask the RDU Airport Authority to not build their recently announced proposed but unnecessary 8.3 miles of 9 feet tall chain link barbed wire fence with an additional 30 feet of deforested swath along Umstead State Park, Crabtree Creek, Foxcroft Lake, and other streams and wetlands, which would destroy forestry riparian areas and public access to Umstead State Park along your greenway trails as well. We have two visions before us. We can destroy our public lands with the first private rock quarry on public lands in North Carolina, a 400-foot deep pit, 9 feet security fence severing one of the last remaining connected wildlife and recreational corridors in Wake County, with 2 rows of fencing along the road. And your attached graphic, it's an unnecessary fence. The fence, for example, because there's already a security fence that protects the runways. It is the yellow line on your attached map next to the runways. This proposed fence would isolate 2 islands, that's red on your map, that wouldn't serve any security for the airport and are unnecessary. Or, with your help with an amicus brief and help with the better collaboration with the public and RDU Airport Authority, we can have a sustainable income streams for the RDU Airport Authority and increase community engagement and assets, increase our protection of our greatest assets of recreational connected corridors, greenways, and parks, and provide a true economic engine. As a municipal owner, you have the duty and responsibility to protect your public lands. The public record shows that you and the other 4 local government owners of the RDU Airport have taken this duty seriously in the past. I've given you examples in your handout. We ask that you please do that again and support your property rights and file an amicus brief with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Spooner. Next, we have Brian Mohorn. Name and address, please.
I'm Brian Mohorn. I reside at 113 High Country Drive, Cary. I'm here today to ask that you consider filing an amicus brief to support the efforts of the Umstead Coalition and TORC to prevent a private mining company from operating on publicly owned lands. Here are 3 items to support my request. The financial package of the lease agreement nets the mining company approximately $500 million in revenue, while RDU gets roughly $25 million. Throw in a security fence at an RDU projected cost of $8 million, and RDU is now looking at less than $1 million per year for the next 25 years. Those numbers are not good for RDU or Wake or Durham County residents. Next, aggregate supply and demand. We have 3 quarries within 5 miles of RDU. The Hanson Pit off of Raleigh Road is set to expand on private property in 2020. That brings us to 4 active quarries that can service RDU growth for the foreseeable future. A 5th quarry on the Oddfellows track is not needed. Item 3, environmental impact. There exists 10 to 15 miles of hiking and biking trails on the Oddfellows track that have existed for decades now. I would venture to say the trails existed long before the first folks from Marin County, California, rode a bicycle down a mountain and started the mountain bike industry in the late 70s. Compare these trails to a 30-foot swath of clear-cut land for a security fence, patrol vehicles, mining operations, diesel exhaust and heavy equipment, and 20-ton dump trucks, all operating for the next 30 years. Which land use option do you think will have the largest negative impact on the triangle? I have a long personal history here in Raleigh. For example, back in the late 60s, I was one of the kids that attended the Uncle Paul show on WRAL TV5. I am passionate and driven to ensure that we retain a good quality of life in the Triangle area. Currently, we are seeing well-planned, high-density housing being built here in downtown Raleigh, as well as North Raleigh. The surrounding communities, Apex, Cary, Morrisville, Durham, Chapel Hill, Knightdale, Garner, we're all experiencing sustained and rapid growth. As a result, both the airport and Umstead, and let's throw in the Museum of Art, are being crushed by the influx of new users. There are alternative development options that solve the problems of growth. One final comment. You can mine aggregate anywhere in Wake County or Durham County and transport that aggregate to construction sites. However, if you lose the 300 acres of undeveloped land, I can guarantee you that you cannot transport green space from surrounding areas back to the heart of Raleigh-Durham. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time and service. And remember, the most important task that you face is to do what is right for the city of Raleigh and the people that live, work, and play here.
Excuse me, one of the rules of decorum, no cheering from the audience, so please hold your applause, please. Thank you. Next, we have Natalie Liu. Thank you, Mr. Mohorn. Name and address, please.
My name is Natalie Liu, and I live at 7909 Ebenezer Church Road in Raleigh, North Carolina. On Sunday, I visited every parking lot adjacent to Umstead State Park. All were full. The Town of Cary parking lot on Old Reeder Creek Road was so full that people were parked on the sides of the gravel road. Also, many people were accessing this area via the Black Creek Greenway. The Old Reeder Creek Road corridor is a short stretch of gravel road that connects Wake County's Lake Crabtree County Park to Umstead State Park and is a highly used area that is happily congested with people of all ages walking, hiking, biking, fishing, and just observing, all enjoying a forested environment located in the middle of a city environment. Why does this matter? Well, this highly used area is about to be destroyed. Per the airport's master plan, Lake Crabtree County Park will soon be developed into a hotel and business park. The cash-strapped airport authority recently announced plans to spend $2.5 million just to install a prison-grade fence, barbed wire fence along Old Reedy Creek Road corridor and the Umstead State Park border, even though aviation lands are already fenced in. The community, including the Boy Scouts, has been using these lands since the 1950s. I do not support the unsanctioned use of the land, but given the pending loss of Lake Crabtree County Park, the extremely high use of this area already, the location of this area being next to Umstead State Park and a major greenway, it is a very smart decision to transition this land into sanctioned public trails. The problem is that the airport authority has married the lease of the 286 lands to the quarry on the Oddfellows. There is an easy solution that actually creates income for the airport. The airport authority should separate the lease of the 286 land from the rock quarry, lease the 286 land at a reasonable rate to Wake County, and allow Torque to manage and maintain the trails for free, just as being done at Lake Crabtree County Park. No $2.5 million fence needed. The airport authority claims one reason for this fence is needed because of the dangerous features that have been created. How stupid. Every one of the features on the 286 land is replicated on legal trails at Lake Crabtree County Park. I'm a 54-year-old woman who rides these features. I know a lot of other 40 and 50-year-old women and a lot of young kids who ride these features. The airport authority is being a bully and misrepresenting the situation. The airport authority also claims that they need the fence because the trails are causing environmental damage. Ha ha ha! What is a quarry going to do? I'll let others expand on that issue. The airport authority has also claimed that they are the economic driver for this area. Wrong. If we did not have the airport in its current location, this area would still be great. The economic drivers of this area are the people who live and work here. We make it great, and we know that saving the Old Reedy Creek Road corridor from fencing and a rock quarry will keep us heading in the right direction. Do not cower to anyone that says you don't have a say. You do, because you are the deeded owner of this land, and it is not needed for aviation use. We elected you to speak up for us, and now is the time to speak. Please file an amicus brief in support of our lawsuit. Tell the RDUA to spend money wisely. No $2.5 million fence, no quarry on public land. Please protect our community
Your time
asset.
is up. Thank you. Next up, Hua Hang. If you could give your name and your address, please.
Good evening. My name is Hua Huang. I'm a resident at 7401 Ebenezer Church Road, Raleigh 27612. I am an executive committee member of the Capital Group Sierra Club, and I'm here to talk about the environmental concerns with the construction of the chain link fence that's proposed by the RDU Airport Authority to surround and isolate the tracts of land otherwise known as 286 and the Oddfellows tract. This is not just speaking from the context of hikers and bikers, but a concern for how the construction of the fence, the proposed quarry, will impact the water quality, air quality, local biodiversity, and how all of these impacts will affect the health and quality of life for the local communities decades down the line. The Airport Authority should not vote to proceed on this matter when there's currently no known evidence of having done a thorough environmental impact study on the affected areas. The proposed clearing of 30 feet width of trees and installing the 8.2 miles of fence could increase flash flood risk to downstream bridges on Crabtree Creek and News River. The project could also involve clear cutting of hardwood that would otherwise help filter the water that eventually goes into the Crabtree Creek and directly flowing into Umstead State Park. The fence also cut a portion of the key state park trail, requiring Umstead State Park to relocate its historic trail for the airport. Additionally, as the lands are also habitats to wildlife, there is also a concern for how the fence would impact the wildlife corridor in the area. None of these concerns have yet to address how it would impact the nearby private landowners, the Dunns and Betsy Beale. The Airport Authority stated that they have concern for the environmental impacts brought about by the hikers and bikers over the years, and that the Umstead State Park was the one that encroached upon this proposed fence area. I would like to know how the park did the encroachment when it has been managing the trail for the last 85 years on historic roadbeds, and how the impacts from the bike tracks outweigh the impact that would be brought about by clear cutting and quarry operation next to the state park near Company Mill Trail and Crabtree Creek. This is why I respectfully ask the Raleigh City Council to call upon the RDU Airport Authority to properly conduct all of the necessary environmental impact studies to understand how the fence and the quarry will affect the water, air, and wildlife corridor, and then decide whether or not it is still actually in the best interest of the community to clear cut the forest for the fence or allow a new 400-foot deep rock mine. And they should make this report available for the public to review. Lastly, as the resolution was passed by City Council last year opposing the quarry, I strongly urge the City Council to side with Umstead Coalition and TORC to file an amicus brief for the appeal of the current lawsuit, as this will be a way to act on the issue with a greater picture in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank everybody who came out tonight, and I'd also like to recognize one group who's with us tonight, Boy Scout Troop 28G. Would you mind standing? That's right. It's a Boy Scout troop of all young ladies. Mr. Neil Perry is the leader, and we thank you for attending tonight to observe municipal government in action. I hope it didn't disappoint you. And I guess you're working toward your Citizen in Community Merit Badge. Is that correct? Okay. Well, good luck, and we're going to start the public hearing part. It's very exciting, so get ready. We're talking about zoning. All right. The first item, petition annexations. Let's see. We have Christopher Golden from City Planning.
So, Mayor and Council, these are routine.
Yes.
You might want to hold the public hearing. Christopher has slides related to the two subjects, but you may want to see if you need a presentation.
I don't. These are usually routine.
You could hold
matters.
the hearing and then see if
have
we
the
can answer
hearing
questions.
open and
You
close
still have
it.
to go through the hearing steps, but you don't
Right,
have to.
right.
In other words, find out if anybody's here to speak for or against. And could we see if Mr., is that what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Could we see if Mr. Martin could come back in the room? Is there somebody who might retrieve him? Hi, Mr. Nutt, thank you. Okay. All right, so for the first item, let's see. The petitioner, oh man, I need my glasses. Jones Sausage Gas, 4.3 acres, retail bar and restaurant. Anybody here to speak on that matter? So we'll close the hearing. Do I have right?
Did you open it?
Yeah.
Okay.
No one here to speak on it? Okay, close the hearing? Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Second is Glenwood Homes LLC, 1.5 acres, townhomes, zoning is R10. Is anybody here to speak on this one, Glenwood Homes LLC?
So just open and close it.
We'll open the hearing. No one here? We will close the hearing. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay. Next item is the rezoning Z1219 Sunnybrook Road. We have Bynum Waller here, Waller, sorry. I'm getting new glasses. So they're not doing me any good at the eye doctor's office, and I'm struggling a little, so forgive me. But you're going to present tonight, right?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Can I ask a question before you start? Is there anyone here to speak in favor or against this specific rezoning? All right, you're already sitting up front. If there's anybody else here who would like to speak, please come down front so we can move this along quickly. Okay?
Thank you. Good evening, Bynum Walter, Raleigh City Planning. I'm going to talk to you about several rezoning items tonight. The first is rezoning 1219 at 2224 Sunnybrook Road. This is a request to rezone just over 4 acres from R6 with a SHOD to neighborhood mixed use with a 3-story height limit. Some conditions, and the SHOD remains in place. The Planning Commission recommends approval, as does the South CAC. The property is located on the west side of Sunnybrook Road, just north of Rock Quarry. And you can see that...
Ms. Bynum, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So you're saying the Planning Commission actually approved because we have something different in our backup? Okay.
Yeah, they
okay.
voted
I
to
see
approve.
It. Okay.
You've just been provided with some options, so they have called the case consistent with a comprehensive plan, which is not what staff said.
Got you. Okay.
So this area is generally zoned residential, largely R6 on the west side of Sunnybrook and some R10 on the east side, and then also a fair amount of commercial on the east side of Sunnybrook and down to the intersection just south of here, which is what I just said. So you can see this site a little bit larger context. You can see Walnut Creek Amphitheater to the east, and we're just south of 440, just to give you a better context about where we are in the city. And the site is largely wooded. Currently, there's a single-family house present. So the applicant has offered a number of conditions here. She has prohibited a selection of uses and also limited the indoor recreation use to summer camp only. Has restricted eating establishments and retail also to by limiting the square footage, and has guaranteed that 50% of the site should remain open space, and that a large portion of that would be adjacent to the Sunnybrook Estate subdivision, which you could see in the aerial photo here, immediately to the west of the site. Furthermore, the stormwater control plan must include rain gardens or rain barrels. They have exempted themselves from the block perimeter standard, and said that they could use a pedestrian path to satisfy connectivity if the property is not subdivided, and the residential density is limited to no more than 6 units per acre. Also have limited the non-residential development to no more than 30,000 square feet. So what's happening here, the residential entitlement is not changing. The office square footage and the retail square footage are increasing, and that's really to facilitate continuation of the current use as a summer camp, day camp for young people. So the request is not consistent with the low-density residential designation on the future land use map. That's currently the adopted policy. There's no urban form designation here. So inconsistent with the future land use map, but consistent with the urban form map. A handful of consistent policies, also a number of inconsistent policies. And then if you did approve this, if you chose to take that action, you would need to make an amendment to the future land use map to adopt a designation consistent with the zoning you select. And here's what that would look like. We would recommend office and residential mixed use for best match. I just want to mention that the applicant also will need variances from right-of-way dedication, slope easement, and utility placement. Easement along Sunnybrook Road in the event of redevelopment here. The change of use is going to trigger some site review, and that would require some additional quasi-judicial action on the part of the city to achieve what's desired. Again, the Planning Commission recommends approval, as does the South CAC. Can I answer questions for you about this one?
Good. I think we hear from the applicant.
I have a question for you, Ms. Walter. So you all, I can't remember if it was in the notes or not, I'm sorry, have said that it's inconsistent with the future land use map, but it is consistent with the comprehensive plan overall. And then the Planning Commission decided that in their vote, they said that it was consistent. So that's correct. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Is the applicant here to speak?
Yes. Do you want an aerial or do you want an?
I have a slide.
Oh, let's see if that's here.
Now, this is 8 minutes per side. Is there anybody here to speak against this? Okay. All right, we'll start with the applicant, please.
Good evening and Happy New Year. My name is Yasmin Fazard, and I am Executive Director of ILAS, which is the Institute of Landscape Art and Sustainable Spaces. And we administer the EnviroKids Summer Camp. And this is our 7th year. This past summer was our 7th year administering the camp. It is an extended learning, environmental learning camp, and we work with inner city youth that probably would not have an opportunity to participate in a environmental camp or a summer camp at all. And how do we change the slide? Oh, okay. All right. So we, as a nonprofit, ILAS is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and our goal is to advance the community and work with the community. So the environmental camp was one of the things that the community said that they wanted and needed, and we stepped up to the table and decided that this is what we wanted to do. So the camp does a variety of things. One of the things that the camp does is that it allows the youth to participate in activities throughout the Research Triangle Park, and we have a list of things that we do. We participate in environmental learning at the forest. That we have 2 or 3 educational forests that we participate in. We work with other organizations to help them advance their activities, such as the Catawba Trail, Farm Trail, and we also go to different institutions where we learn various things, like NC State participates with us and gives us a session in the GIS lab. And can we change? Okay, so each summer, we have a major project that we work on. This summer, we worked on the Bailey Drive Greenway space, which is working with the Parks for Purpose and NC State, right near the Walnut Creek Amphitheater. And what the summer youth did was they studied the environment, and they, can we have a change? Okay, so we went out, we studied the environment, we did reconnaissance in the environment, and we ended up, change, please. We ended up putting a topographic model together so that we could see how the land worked and how the water worked across the land. So other studies that we do is we study the forest. We are funded by the USDA. We're studied by the North Carolina Forest Service, and of course, ILAS funds us as well. And what we do is we'll go to an educational forest, and the youth will study the trees. We'll do forest geology. We do a variety of things things with the Rangers, and we do things like historic paper making, and the youth also study the soil and water within the area. And of course, we spoke about the GIS lab where they learn GIS, and we've done a lot of things to advance their activities with water study. And so one of the major things that they like to do, and we actually enjoy ourselves, is we always go to either something on the coast. So this summer, we went to Hamlet Beach State Park, and we studied on 2 islands. One island was called Jones Island, which is a forested island, and what they do is they go in and they study the various species in the water on a forested island. And then we also went to a island that had no trees, and we studied the species on that island. And of course, really close to home, we went to Jordan Lake and we did water testing, and we figured out that it had an excellent rating. We want to make sure that the youth are aware and they are of what they are eating. So we had them participate in a cooking education. And of course, we told them that we were trying to get the rezoning. So they came here and they were actually participating and seeing what the city council would do. So we had a session with the
Mayor Clerk.
Yes. So thank you very much.
Okay, please note there's 2 minutes and 50 seconds left on the clock. Okay.
Okay, thank you. My name is Diana Powell. I'm Executive Director of Justice Serve of North Carolina. I'm here to speak against this because this has been a very, very important program to our community. I work with youth, and I've seen them have to struggle just trying to survive in our city. And this program, when I stumbled across this about 4 years ago, I enrolled my daughter, Cece. She was in it, and she's been going ever since. This has been very educational. It has... 4.
She's 4. She's 4.
Yeah, 4. Okay.
We were very confused when you started speaking. You said against. So.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. I'm for this property to remain there. Okay, and the camp.
Okay, now we go back to 2 minutes, 50 seconds. So yes, okay.
Okay, we're there. We're on the same page.
Yes.
Okay. Because the children, where would they go next summer? Where would they go in the summers in our future? If we take this program away from our city, where would they be? Could they end up in the criminal justice system? Could they end up hungry? Could they end up being criminalized? Could they end up being engaged with police officers that possibly could lose their life? We are trying to save our youth. And this program is one avenue that I know for a fact is continue to save our youth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And okay, now we're not confused anymore. Yes.
Okay, so it is a free program. The youth do not have to pay any amount of money. We get our funding through grants and through volunteers, and so it is not a difficult thing for the parents to allow their teenagers. This is a program for kids between the age of 13 to 18 that don't have anything to do. So we wanted that age range because the city, they actually provide activities for youth between, I guess, 0 to 12 years. But once you get to be 13, there's nothing for 13-year older and up to do. So that's where we stepped in to fill the shoes that the city, they just don't have the funds to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak? Okay, we'll close the hearing and bring this back to council.
Yeah,
Mr. Branch?
I had the pleasure of having a meeting and learning more about this program last year, a couple months ago, and it's a great program, and I think it's something that we definitely need to continue and hopefully find a way to support, and maybe you can partner with our programs in the Pathway Center. As far as connecting youth and young people there. So I'm actually going
That's
to
a great idea, by the way.
So I'm actually going to go with option B, which is really the same as our planning commission. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement labeled option B dated January 7, 2020, containing the agenda material, and to approve the zoning amendment. This approval is also deemed an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Second.
Do we have a
Councilmember
second?
Cox seconded before I did.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's rare we have zoning cases that like kind of tug at your heartstrings, so thank you. The next item is rezoning Z22 19 South New Hope Road, the northern quarter of the intersection New Hope Road and Rock Quarry Road.
That's right. And if you feel like this looks familiar, it's because it does. We looked at the property immediately across New Hope Road when we were together in early December. So it's not Groundhog Day. It's a different case, just really close by. So this is about 43 and a half acres, a rezoning request to go from planned development to commercial mixed use, 5-story height limit with conditions. The Planning Commission recommends approval, as does the Southeast CAC. And so you can see here, the area in question is pink, surrounded on the west side by conservation management zoning. This is, we're on the east side of the Walnut Creek amphitheater. So we were just on the west side, now we're on the east side. And so a fair amount of sensitive wetland here in this area. And then on the east side, that R10 area that you can see there, that's the portion of the, well, let me keep going. So this is a remnant of the Old Town PD. Most of it was rezoned to R10 by Z7 18, and the red portion was removed from the PD by you at your last meeting as part of Z21 19. So you can see the entirety of the PD. The yellow portion was approved previously. This afternoon, you scheduled a public hearing for a text change to zoning conditions for that portion of the site to happen in February on the 4th. And the portion in blue here, or green, was approved at your last meeting. And then the white portion on the west side of the New Hope here is what's in question tonight. So a couple of views of the site. A handful of conditions here. So some prohibited uses, limit on the number of lots with non-residential primary uses that can front along South New Hope, a limit on the total square footage of medical and office use, and also a limit on all commercial use other than medical and office, a requirement for a 10-foot multi-use path along South New Hope Road rather than the anticipated sidewalk that would be required, a requirement to deed some greenway easements to the city, and then also some limits on fill material and lot coverage in keeping with the UDO standards. Again, remember I mentioned we're in the Walnut Creek watershed here. So what's happening is you're seeing an increase in your office entitlement and your retail entitlement, and there's no residential entitlement here. So consistent with the community mixed use and office and residential mixed use designation on the map, on the future land use map, consistent with the plan overall, number of policies that are consistent. 2 inconsistent policies, probably more could have been done to address those sensitive wetlands. But the Planning Commission recommends approval, and the Southeast CAC also recommends approval. I'm happy to answer any outstanding questions you might have before you open the hearing.
I have a question. How similar are the conditions put in place here to what the PD had in place?
I would need to look at the staff report and get back to you on that.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Who, the applicant is here. Let me ask, who is here to speak in favor of this? And who is here to speak against this? Is there anybody here to speak against this? Mr. Branch, this is your district. Are you?
Yeah, I do. I just have one concern as far as conditions of things prohibited. One of them.
Why don't we have the applicant come? Do you want to ask the applicant?
Yeah, the applicant can come up.
Why don't we have the applicant come up? We can put it on 8 minutes, but we might be able to move along a little quicker if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all. Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Charles Walker, 275 North Pea Ridge Road in Pittsburgh, North Carolina. Here to advocate the glacial speed which the transition of Old Town is happening. I'll be glad to answer any kind of questions that Mr. Branch has.
Storage units.
Yes.
Are you willing to add that as a condition of something to prohibit?
I thought we were clear we were not going to do storage units, but if
It's
you want
not-
something, if you want something specific to add to that, absolutely.
Yeah, because it's not there. So I just wonder if you would be interested in that, because I know we had that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So changing that condition at this point,
First, Bynum, you would close the public hearing?
well, we haven't closed it. It's still open.
I mean, to add the conditions, hold on.
So you would need to close the hearing to allow Mr. Walker to submit revisions. But then just remember, he would only have 30 days to make those changes, so he'd need to move pretty quickly. And if you wanted to be back in front of the next council meeting, you'd have to have those in by Friday.
Okay. I didn't know that was going to delay us, but okay.
It's a question. I know you stated it, but it's not listed, and that's my concern.
When we put the listing of the uses, we had originally thought about having storage on there. That we understood that was there was a reluctance to that, so that's why we limited it to commercial and office, and we thought that covered it.
So let me ask staff, city attorney, does that, with the limit of commercial and whatnot, does that cover storage?
It depends on where it is in the table of permitted uses, and I'm not sure.
Just ask Ken to look it up. Yeah.
Okay. And if not, I guess it would just be adding that one word, those two words, and then close it, add the two words, and come back. I could be looking too, but he's probably quicker than I am. Look, I'll search too.
So I thought I saw it earlier and I missed it. So
Well, we had again, we had discussed it earlier in the process, and we had said that we would not do it, and we would just be for office and medical uses in the office complex, and then the commercial uses we never intended for storage to be included, and we thought we had.
Okay, I think we have an answer.
Light industrial uses are prohibited by the conditions as offered, and self-service storage falls into that category. So it's already prohibited.
Okay.
See how fast we move?
I'm telling you what, 10 or 20 years from now, we'll have this sucker built, I promise.
All right, Mr. Branch, anything else?
No, I mean, we had a conversation about, well, I'll let you finish.
Well, can we close the hearing
Yeah,
then?
I'll let you close the hearing and I can say what I
Okay,
need to
so we're
say.
going to close the hearing, that your issue is taken care of. Is there anything else before I call for?
I mean, this project
motion.
is a long time coming.
With long being the operative word. Yeah.
2003.
Yeah, so I was 3 years out of college.
That's it, rub it in.
But the thing is that we're now here to move this project forward with the great work of the team that put this together, as well as the community. They went to multiple CAC meetings. They went to 2 CACs to make sure that everyone felt comfortable with this project. They even talked to past council members that were involved and brought them into the process. So with that said, let me go make sure I get the consistency statement.
Please say it right, Corey, please.
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated January 7th, 2020, contained in the agenda material to approve the zoning amendment.
Second.
I'm here all week. Tip your waitresses.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Knight said he was in favor of it, which is why I didn't excuse him when he left, so we're all good. So, all right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your patience. Yes. Fine, go for it.
This is Z27 2019. This is located on the south side of Hillsborough Street, considerably in West Raleigh, just inside the Beltline. The zoning here is a real mix. So you have a fair amount of industrial mixed use to the north, and then some commercial, office, and neighborhood mixed use on the south side of the street here, as well as a considerable amount of residential. What was once called Wolf Creek Apartments is now called La Vie. It's gotten French and fancy out there. But largely surrounded by apartments on the south side there. So you can see that. And a couple of views of the site. There's a couple single-family houses on the site currently. So they've offered a handful of conditions. They have prohibited standalone commercial. They're basically mimicking, I just want to go back and say we're changing to a neighborhood mixed-use district, 5-story height limit with a green frontage and conditions. But their use prohibitions that they're putting in place are essentially mimicking like residential mixed use. And that's, so they're kind of mimicking that with the limit of the no freestanding, and then limiting themselves to 15% or 6,000 square feet, whichever is greater on their commercial use, limiting hours of operation, no drive-through or drive-in, and prohibiting some of the more impactful uses otherwise allowed in the neighborhood mixed-use district. So vehicle sales, fuel sales, vehicle repair, those kinds of things. So bar, nightclub, tavern also permitted, but they could have a restaurant.
A storage facility is included in that?
Not allowed in the, okay, great. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't know anybody but planners made jokes about zoning. You caught me off guard. So the net effect of this rezoning is that the residential entitlement goes up pretty significantly, the maximum number of units. The setback is also going to increase because of the application of the green frontage. So that requires a minimum setback of at least 20 feet and some landscaping. And it can be as much as 50 feet back, but it does prohibit parking between the street and any building that's constructed. And so your maximum gross office, based on our projected allowable square footage, remember they said 6,000 square feet or 15%, whichever is greater. So if they really max out that building, they could conceivably allow themselves as much as 18,000 square feet of retail. The requested annexed district, because of the way it has been conditioned, is consistent with the high-density residential designation on the future land use map. The frontage offered is consistent with the transit emphasis corridor designation on the urban form map. So those are both consistent, and then there are numerous consistent policies. The Planning Commission and the West CAC both recommend approval. Can I answer questions for you about this case before you open the hearing?
Anybody have a question? Okay, I'm going to ask, again, is the applicant here? Okay, and would you come down, please? Is there anyone here other than the applicant to speak in favor of this case? Is there anyone here to speak against this case? Okay, Mr. Martin, this is your district, correct? Do you have any concerns?
Can I ask one question? The 2 negative votes, do you know what they were for?
I do not.
Okay.
Ma'am, if you could give your name and address for the record. I think, if I'm reading Mr. Martin correctly, he's probably ready to move forward with a motion on this. So we could save some time.
Okay, my name's Brenda Measamer, Measamer. I live at 1007 Branwell Drive, Durham, 27703, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions of the applicant? Okay. I'm going to close the hearing then, and Counselor Martin?
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated January 7th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Z2919, 5706 Rock Quarry Road.
Yes, so this is about 8 acres, and they are asking to rezone from R4 to RX3. It's a residential mixed-use district with a 3-story height limit, parking limited frontage and conditions. We're at the rough intersection of Barwell, Pearl, and Rock Quarry here, so we're just south of Barwell Road Park, which is a city facility. And you can see considerable amount of residential zoning in this area. They're asking for RX3, which is comparable in scale, at least to what is entitled on the northeast side of Rock Quarry here. So this is inconsistent with the future land use map. The South CAC recommends approval by a split vote, and the Planning Commission recommends approval. So you can see Barwell Road Park up here. Quarry Trace apartments have been constructed since this photograph was made. And then you can see the site here on the southwest and southeast side of Pearl and Rock Quarry Road. So this is a picture of the site from Rock Quarry Road and then from Pearl Road. So this is limited by use to an age-restricted community, a limit on units to no more than 11 units per acre. They have waived the block perimeter requirements for themselves in order to gain relief from Stub Street requirements. Retail and restaurant uses are prohibited, which otherwise would be allowed in a small amount in the residential mixed-use district. They've also prohibited office uses, except as an accessory use for an apartment development. So the idea that they might have a leasing office would be allowed. And then furthermore, they have required themselves to provide a pedestrian path connecting Apperson Drive, and then a type 2 protective yard installed along the south and eastern boundaries of the property. So going back to that aerial view so you can understand that. So they're saying they would put protective yard here adjacent to existing development. The net effect here is a significant increase in the residential entitlement and in the overall allowable gross building square footage. And then they have limited themselves to no more than 4,000 square feet of office space. The frontage offered is consistent with the transit emphasis corridor that's present on the urban form map, consistent with a number of policies, inconsistent with a couple, mostly related to connectivity. Remember, I mentioned those block perimeter conditions they had offered. And then because they're inconsistent with the future land use map, I'm not seeing the slide here that I thought was here. An amendment would be required here to satisfy state requirements about consistency with future land use map. So South CAC, a split vote, a lot of concern about the traffic in this area, and also concerns that the neighborhood is being asked to shoulder an unfair share of affordable housing in the city. Just a concern about general concentration of affordable housing in the area. Can I answer questions for you? In your consistency statement in your packet, it should indicate the type of amendment to the map that would be required.
I have a question regarding this. So senior housing, there's no retail, restaurants, anything. What is the reason for that? I'm just thinking if there was a coffee shop on site or something like that, that actually would cut down on traffic and make the area a little more walkable. So I'm wondering what discussions were had relating to no retail.
I think the applicant might want to speak about why they've offered what they have.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm going to ask the same question I've asked before. Ms. Maddox coming up for the applicant. Is there anybody else here who would like to speak in favor of this project? Is there anyone here who would like to speak against this project? We have one person. Could you come sit in the front, please? Anybody else who would like to speak against, come sit in the front, please, so we can move this along. Ms. Maddox, if you'll.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. Isabel Maddox, P.O. Box 946, Raleigh 27602. I'm here tonight on behalf of Evergreen Construction, an affordable housing developer who's been in business in this area for over 40 years. With me tonight are Tim Morgan, Vice President of Evergreen, Rick Baker, our civil engineer of Timmons Group, and Cliff Lawson, our traffic engineer, also of Timmons Group. Ms. Walters did a good job of orienting you to the site, so I won't go there, but we do think this is an appropriate site. Even though this is zoned R4 now, it's adjacent to property that is effectively developed close to R10 density, and directly across the street is an RX zone property. In this case, we are proposing 84 units. The conditions limit to 88, but 84 is our proposal. Will be for 55 years and older. There will be affordable units slated for people earning 30, 40, 50, and 60% of the area median income. It is overall consistent with the comp plan, though, and compatible with the neighborhood. It is on two transit lines, and it is within close proximity of Battle Bridge shops and also a Dollar General. You asked about why we could we do some sort of retail coffee shop. You know, my clients do affordable housing. They really don't do retail, and mixed-use development's difficult to do. Also, we felt like because if we allow for retail without conditioning it out, it drives traffic up and it makes it look like there's going to generate way more traffic than probably would be the case. So even though it does make sense that people could walk in and have a coffee on site, the reality is a coffee shop has to draw from a lot of places outside the neighborhood in order to be successful financially, and my folks don't really develop mixed-use developments.
Are there any types of amenities like that on site, Isabel?
Well, I'll let Mr. Morgan speak to any amenities on site. There's, I think, sort of a business center and a community room, that type of thing. But I don't know that there's anything like, is there any kind of coffee or anything? You're correct. Yeah. It'll be like a room with computers and one where you can have community meetings or meetings, exercise room, those kinds of things, library. So. We did have some issues that we went to two CACs. We went to the south. We were in the south, but we were very close. So we went to the south twice, and then went to the southeast twice. So the southeast did not vote because they weren't really the operative CAC, but we did visit each, and the south did vote in favor. It was a close vote. Their main concern was traffic, and we have a couple of things that we think are important here. One, we will add some traffic improvements with this development. We will widen the road, we think, and also the city is planning a realignment of Pearl Road and Rock Quarry intersection. That's scheduled to come online, be complete in spring of 2023, which is about the same time this property will be leasing up. So we think that dovetails pretty nicely. Also, we had our traffic engineer do an analysis of comparing if this property were developed with this by right zoning, which is R4. So it's a little over 8 acres, so with 32 residential units, what the traffic would be generated there. And we actually, and I have some past handouts for you, we found that the traffic for an R4 development will actually be higher than with a senior affordable housing development. Senior developments don't drive that kind of traffic that R4 neighborhood would drive. So both the daily trips and the peak hour AM and PM were lower with a development that would be developed here as affordable senior housing. As Ms. Walters said, the Planning Commission unanimously approved this case. We do believe this case is reasonable in the public interest, and as it provides the following benefits to the city. It adds to our affordable housing stock, which we know we need to add to. It also adds to senior housing. It facilitates some needed right-of-way improvements, and also by putting higher density development on transit corridor, it supports our transit. And our team, our engineers, and our developer are here for questions. I'm also available for questions.
So I just wanted to reiterate the question I started with. I think more than anything, what I'm interested in is whether there are gathering spaces on the site.
Yes.
And it sounds like there are.
There
Community
are.
room, library. Just one of the things we know with seniors, and something that's, I hate using the word senior because I guess I qualify as one, but, all right, I'm depressed and going home now. But, is isolation.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to make sure there were places for people to gather on site and, develop friendships, exercise room.
Yes,
That's all
and there
good.
will be some activities, I think, slated, programmed for seniors in some of those gathering spaces.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else have?
If you don't mind, Madam Mayor, just to follow up on what you're saying, it seems to me, and I support the project, but it seems to me, I'm just noting the fact that it's a low income aspects, it's senior housing, and there's really not a lot of things they can do by walking or staying on site as opposed to living there. But I think I would be responsive, and this council would be responsive, if there were more opportunities within these type of developments for folks to stay where they are to do the type of activities and both recreation activities, but also buying and commerce. I think would be something that we would be responsive to. So just something to think about as your clients and others move forward in these type of projects in the future.
Noted, duly noted.
Okay. A couple things I want to say is that this project is one of the few I've seen in senior housing that's in less than probably half a mile, probably a quarter of a mile. We actually have a city park. It's right across from Barwell Park. This is also up the street on the back side of the Old Town projects that we just approved. So when we talk about traffic and redevelopment, I really am looking forward to more conversations with our transportation department on the timing of some of these road widening projects and light synchronization. I think the way yours falls, it being a tax credit project as well as what you're doing, a lot of your time frame, basically you would be no sooner than 2023. That's the
very
earliest.
end of 2022 is what we're projecting.
2022.
The lease up would be probably first quarter of 2023.
Right. That's with the blessing
Yeah.
of the tax credit process. So that's the earliest, which means that the road alignment with Pearl and Barwell will have been put in place by the time you open. So I think that is something that helps this project as well.
Okay. You have 2 minutes and 11 seconds left. We'll note that.
I'd like to reserve that.
And yes, and then let's hear from anybody who would like to speak against. Please stand up and give your name and address, please.
Yes, ma'am. Diane Smith. I live at 4006 Volkswagen Place in Amateur Ridge Townhouse. I do apologize. I'm not really prepared because I did get a letter from her law firm, but the date up there says the 20th of this month, and I may have misunderstood the letter when this hearing was coming, so I do apologize. I am against it at this time because of the traffic issue, and so I'm out there every morning coming home at night, so that's adjacent to my townhouse as it is now. Don't mind that coming down the road, but the roads needs to be done first to accommodate, because we already got traffic from Battle Ridge on the other side of Griffin Glen, Summerlin, all those areas out there past Battle Shops. Unfortunately, it's not really so much of a restaurant. You have McDonald's, Domino's. I mean, really, for them, for senior citizens or a senior living place there, they'll be either stuck there and they don't have any walkways to cross over to the Barwell Community Center. So until the roads get done out there, I'm really opposing that for any child living in that neighborhood can cross over and get hit as it is now. So therefore, this should not happen until the roads get straightened out first. Thank you.
Anybody else who would like to speak to this?
Hi, my name is Mary Hall, and I live at 3413 Cherry Lane, which is Sages District, but I drive out to Barwell Road, this area. And I drive out there because I have a friend who doesn't have a car and who doesn't have a home, so she's renting a room. And I can tell you that there's lots of new construction going up there. I don't know if anybody's been out there lately. Huge apartment and a couple of apartments, and across the road a cemetery, and lots of stuff going on, lots of backed up traffic. My questioning of all of this is that if this is like a tax credit project and it's affordable housing and all that's great, and as soon as people say affordable housing, everybody jumps on it, how many units? 20%? In 10 years, do they get to take it back and do whatever they want with it? If it's anything like some of these other tax credit developments where you pay a $25 application fee regardless of who is putting it together, they may be the same, they may already have projects. I don't know this organization or anything like that. So I'm just curious, when we say affordable housing and they say 30, 40, 60, 50, 80, it's all great, well and good. How many? How long? Let's not jump on stuff just because it sounds good. Let's make sure that, I know it's a process, and I know it costs money for it to take time. So I'm all for affordable housing. I just like it to be in appropriate places where people who need affordable housing actually have access to transit and activities. Activities especially, those roads are terrible.
And this is located next to 2 transit lines, and I'll just say Evergreen has been around for 40 years and has done outstanding work in this area. But yes,
We are proposing 84 units, all of which will be affordable, and they will be committed for 30 years. And you said we are on 2 transit lines. We will add sidewalks with our project, so we will be helping with the walkability in the area. Tim.
Tim Morgan, Evergreen Construction, 7706 Six Forks Road here in Raleigh. And as Ms. Maddox said, there will be land use restrictions that are recorded if this project does move forward. As Mr. Branch said, we will be applying for tax credits through the Housing Finance Agency. It's a 9% tax credit. It's a very competitive credit. It's about a 25 to 30% chance of success with getting those credits. We will also be seeking money from the City of Raleigh through the Housing and Neighborhoods Department. So this will be coming back before this board for that approval. We will also be seeking dollars from Wake County. Again, that will go before the Board of Commissioners for their approval. And as Ms. Maddox said, and as the mayor did, we've been around since 1978. We have partnered with the city on 12 different projects throughout our history, and I can attest that affordable housing is much needed. Yes, sometimes the roads don't catch up with it, but just to give an example, we have a 42-unit community off of Spring Forest Road. We just got CO'd 42 units. First day of pre-leasing, we mailed out 450 applications for 42 units. So big need, big demand. And our senior portfolios, about 20% of the square footage is devoted to common area space for amenities that we have just discussed. So I'm here for additional questions.
Okay. Any additional questions for the applicant?
Not for the applicant.
Okay. Can we close the hearing? Okay. We'll close the hearing. Mr. Branch?
I can have staff provide us a update on the road widening projects in that area. I know there's a lot of individual projects, like for instance, we know the Old Town project is there, but when they do their widening, it's only on their property that butts their road, which is only on their side. There still is another side of the road that will have to be widened. So if we could just get an update from staff on that in our manager's update, I think it would be helpful for all the council, and we can share that.
Sure, we'll be happy to do that.
Okay. Any other questions from councilors? Well, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated January 7th, 2020, containing the agenda material, and to approve the zoning amendment. This approval is also deemed an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. We desperately need housing for seniors, so thank you. Hope the project's successful. Okay, the next item is text change zoning conditions case TCZ 619, 2923 Edwards Mill Road. I would ask for a motion to be excused on this due to a conflict. So if someone would make that motion and second it.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
It's been moved and properly second to excuse the mayor from this issue. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, motion carries. We now have, as stated here, a text change zoning case condition TCZ 619, staff report Edwards Mill Road. And before we start, is there anyone here to speak against this matter? Anyone here to speak for it? Okay, all right, so we'll let you, staff, go ahead and present this zoning condition change.
Again, Mark Holland, Planning and Development Services. This is TCZ 6-19, which is 2923 Edwards Mill Road. This is an amendment to the conditions associated with zoning case Z 8-18, as approved in Ordinance 886 Z C 770. The Planning Commission approved this application, recommended it for approval, as did the Northwest CAC. In both cases, it was unanimous. Again, the property is located at 2923 Edwards Mill Road, which you can see here is northwest of Rex Hospital, just to orient you there. There are three conditions that currently govern the property, which generally regulate office, regulate use, office, retail use, square footage, residential dwelling unit limitation, and the requirement for the parking limited standards for any new construction. The petitioner is requesting to amend the condition requiring the parking limited standards, which this is condition 3, which you see here in the strike-through. This is the strike-through version of that, and just to show you the clean copy of it, it would be revised to read that the following standards shall apply to any site plan for new construction on the portion of the subject site bounded by Blue Ridge Road, Macon Pond Road, Hopeful Way, and Lake Drive. No parking between any building and Blue Ridge Road. A minimum of 40% of the linear frontage along Blue Ridge Road shall have a building within 0 and 100 feet of Blue Ridge Road, and a minimum of one pedestrian street facing access door per building. No other conditions are being requested to be amended or removed with this application. Just to show you a side-by-side comparison, again, conditions 1 and 2 would remain as is, and it would be condition 3 only that is being amended, and it would be to remove that parking limited standards and to place new standards in place. This item was heard at the Northwest CAC meeting on November the 12th, and again received a unanimous vote from them. Staff is available for any questions.
Any questions from the councilors? All right.
Make the motion when it's right.
Okay. At this time, we'll open the hearing. Hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Councilors Mac Paul, 421 Fayetteville Street. Here on behalf of UNC Rex Healthcare, I'll be brief, but I do wanted to acknowledge a couple folks here with me. Tom Grates, who's the Associate Vice President for UNC Rex Cancer Care, and Brian O'Haver with Stewart, who has been working diligently on the site plan. One of the high priorities for UNC Rex is the delivery of an outpatient cancer center at their campus on Edwards Mill and Blue Ridge Road. And they filed a site plan last year. During the course of that, it became clear that this zoning condition was an impediment to approval because of a text change that prohibits administrative alternates to zoning conditions. Thankfully, we worked with staff and identifying different avenues to correct this, and this text change appeared to be the quickest, best way to address the issue with the site plan. just, I think, says a lot about UNC Rex during the process. Despite the urgency of this and they're behind schedule on this outpatient cancer center, Blue Ridge Corridor Alliance asked if they would work with them to, instead of completely eliminating this condition, honor the principles of that corridor plan by addressing the building as it relates to Blue Ridge Road. So we worked through that at the Planning Commission, delaying the project a little bit to do that, but got them comfortable, and they unanimously supported it as well. So I know it's a little bit of a technical issue, but we're happy to answer any questions. Again, Brian has been working down in the weeds on all of the site plan issues. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else to speak to this matter? All right. Anyone here to speak against? We will close the hearing and bring it back to council.
Thank you. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated January 7th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the text change to the conditional use zoning.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed have the same right. Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Thank you. She's coming in. All right. We'll let staff come up as we hand this back over to the mayor for text change TC 719.
Thank you very much.
TC 719 is text change to amend the infill subdivisions and recombinations section of the UDO. It would create a regulatory framework for addressing the compatibility of subdivisions or recombinations in an infill context. The Planning Commission reviewed this text change in November of 2019 and recommended denial of the application or of the text change. As part of the Planning Commission's review of this application, staff was asked to analyze and quantify the potential impacts of this text change, and were to identify potential impacts on impacted parcels, test proposed rules using a randomized sample, and extrapolate those results. The total number of parcels in the R4 and R6 had to meet the following criteria, and in those findings we found that there were a little bit more than 63,000 lots within the R4 and R6 that would be subject to this text change. And provide a map of those. You can see they're fairly spread out within the city. From those numbers, a total number of parcels in the R4 there were a total of 7,238 parcels within the R4 that were over twice over the minimum requirement, which would make them eligible for being subdivided. And in the R6, there were 4,307 of those lots that could potentially be subdivided. And here's a map showing those particular parcels. Again, fairly spread out within the city. Now, we were asked to get a sample of those. We picked 40 samples within a total, 20 from the R4 and the R6, and the number of those that were still able, these were randomly selected. Among those that were still able to be subdivided, we had a total of 14, 9 from the R4, 5 from the R6. And the bottom row there gives you a percentage of what was still able to be subdivided based upon that sample size. And again, here is a map showing where those are located. As you can see, we took a sample from most every area of the city. Now, the remaining number, the flip side of that is the number that were unable to be subdivided from that 40, and there was a total of 26, 11 in the R4, and 15 in the R6. And just to use those numbers to sort of project them throughout the whole city, The total number of affected parcels would be 11,545, and you see how it's divided up among the R4 and R6 here, and the number that is unable to be satisfied or subdivided would be a total of 7,504. The comparative sampling methodology contained in TC 719 would be required to be done on a parcel by parcel basis, and due to time limit, staffing, and resources, only 20 lots were sampled for this for the purposes of this test. Just to give you some more history on this, this was originally discussed and subsequently authorized in October of 2017 following the adoption of the North Hills NCOD. The council expressed a desire to address recombinations and subdivisions within an infill setting using a context-based methodology. It was sent to the Growth and Natural Resources Committee, where they made a recommendation in spring of 2019. The council then referred the item to the Planning Commission. Purpose and need. In older neighborhoods, current zoning regulations permit recombinations and subdivisions that may be deemed out of context with the existing development pattern. Often this leads to interest in or creation of an NCOD. For example, the North Hills NCOD, that in Northridge, Northridge West, and most recently the Willow Run South. The NCOD process, which is a text change and rezoning process, requires initiation by residents and requires substantial neighborhood grassroots work and gathering of support for the application of that and to get that request, and it also requires substantial staff time and resources. Just to give you some examples of some of the lots that are in those NCODs, in the North Hills NCOD here, you can see outlined in red is the original parcel, and you can see that these lots would be ones that would be subject to subdivision. Again, here's Northridge South. And so you can see that there's a fairly small number from those that were shown there. The impacts of this, the recombination or subdivision of R4 and R6 lots subject to infill would be permitted only if the resulting lot size, the width and the depth meets or exceeds 66% of the median measurement for lots within the specified comparative sample. They would also be required to modify public improvements and right-of-way dedication requirements for these lots when they abut a local street. This methodology, the comparative lot sample, would include the 3 closest residentially zoned lots in both directions as the subject property, and all residentially zoned lots that are located directly across the primary street from this lot range selection in part or whole. If one encounters a non-residentially zoned lot or non-local street lot in any one direction, or non-local street, excuse me, in any one direction, the sampling of the lots in that direction would terminate. The comparative lot sample shall not include any lots located across a non-local street. If a minimum comparative sample totaling at least 3 lots cannot be established, then these residential infill compatibility subdivision recombination rules would not apply. Now, just to give you an example of what we're talking about here, the subject property there is shown outlined in green. The subject area would be those shown in the outline in blue. Now, these would be the properties that they would be able to take, the subject lot would be able to take their sample size from. Again, a different layout here would show you how that would be applied, and another here where it's all on the same side of the street. New Bern Avenue not being a non-local street, everything would have to be on the same side as the subject property. There would be exemptions to this. All of the lots involved with the subdivision or recombination are within a neighborhood conservation overlay district, the NCOD, which we had mentioned. regulates minimum lot size, minimum lot width, or minimum lot depth, or are in the general historic overlay district, a street side historic overlay district, or a designated historic landmark. All of the lots involved with the subdivision or recombination are either equal to or larger in size, width, and depth than they were when they were prior to the recombination, or otherwise each lot conforms to the requirements listed there in the UDO. Any further exemptions here, any portion of the property subject to subdivision or recombination within a walking distance of 1,320 feet of an operating transit stop with service from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. where service intervals are no longer than 15 minutes during peak commute hours. There would be an exemption for all portions of property involved in the subdivision or recombination that are zoned R10. When the lot involved in the subdivision or recombination only fronts on the bulb of a cul-de-sac, it shall not be subject to the comparative median lot width requirements. Site plans or plot plans wherein the proposed changes require a certificate of appropriateness would be exempt from these compatibility rules. Potential adverse impacts could prevent some property owners from realizing the potential economic benefits of subdividing their property. It could limit the creation of new lots in older neighborhoods. It could create an additional regulatory compliance hurdle for persons looking to recombine or subdivide their property. And it creates additional complexities for staff review and increases in staff review times. With that, staff is available for any questions. Don't everyone go at once.
I do want to commend staff for taking the time to
Yeah.
look into how many lots this would affect based on that sample size. I think it really paints a picture of what could happen should this pass. So thank you for going that extra step. And thanks to the Planning Commission for asking for that extra information.
Yes. Wow. Thank you. Basically, this text change would create an NCOD across the city without going through a process.
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
Essentially, yes.
Okay. I'm going to ask what I've asked all night. Is there anybody here who wants to speak in favor of this? And is there anyone here who wants to speak against this text change? In favor?
I don't know whether I'm in favor or against because of the weird wording. Did they approve denial? I don't want to approve denial. I want to speak in favor of the whole thing.
So the Planning Commission voted to deny this case. So if you would... You want,
not the Planning Commission's recommendation.
right, so you want to speak in favor of this?
Okay.
Is that what, okay, you and Helen? Okay, anybody who wants to speak in favor, please come up. And anybody who would like to speak against it, please move up as well so we can move this forward quickly. Thank you. There's 8 minutes to each side. We're going to start with those in favor of the text change. Start. Name and address, please.
Helen Tart, 611 Monroe Drive. I was actually at the Planning Commission meeting and was pleasantly surprised that some action had been taken to address the kinds of infill that has been happening all across the city. One thing that concerned me about when I was finished speaking in favor and of having some kind of control over what happens in existing neighborhoods. The home builders came up, and one of the things that they used against this was that it would reduce the number of, that it would reduce the ability to have affordable housing. And I would urge you, when they make that statement in this forum, to see if they can give you an example of a subdivided lot that has had, that the houses were actually less expensive than what was already there. Maybe they can, I don't know, but most of the time when you see these McMansions being built, they tend to be significantly more expensive than the houses around them. And if you put two of them on there, seems like that would be twice as expensive. But I hope that you, if you don't pass this particular change, that you will look into finding some way of allowing Raleigh to grow without destroying the nature of its existing neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tart. Next, if you'll come up, give your name and address for the record, please.
And hello, nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
My name is Carol Majors. I live at 2706 Coolamy Drive, Raleigh 27608. Hi. I am for residential infill compatibility standards that help older neighborhoods. The older neighborhoods have been responsible in this city for maintaining housing supply, reasonable affordability, opportunities for families of different sizes, ages, to buy into and improve properties over time, and environmentally and ecologically, and very important to me, reducing the number of tear downs that go into our landfill. The most inexpensive housing in this town is already on the ground. The most expensive housing in this town is what's replacing it. Now, y'all are going to be asked to weigh residential infill standards, whether this has been a good thing for us or not, and the NCOD, whether it is a good thing or not. I believe the NCOD, in this particular case that we're discussing here today, actually in that North Hills neighborhood identified those lots because of the, what I call the domino effect. And that is, once there becomes a major disparity in the quality or price of the housing in your neighborhood, every house there who does not conform to that 300% at least rise in prices is a sitting duck. And your neighborhood, once it begins to go down, will be replaced by higher and higher priced housing, because the higher housing affects the lot price and the property price, and your property tax then rise, and the vulnerability of the housing that's left on the ground, if it's snapped up, not by a family who wants to buy, it gets scraped before somebody can buy it, and goodbye affordable housing. I have been coming to these city council meetings since 2007.
When we first met, so I can attest to that.
Yes, and we've had several good discussions and meetings about tear downs. And I want to, one, dispel the myth that what you might hear as neighborhood advocacy and character being about some kind of isolationism of we don't want people different from us or whatever. The character, the trees, the lot size, the setbacks, all of that is about trying to just kind of keep affordability. Massing affects affordability. Over in, I guess it's Sunset Hills, they're recombining what has duplexes on them, and they're replacing them with tall, skinny houses. Well, this is affordable housing that's being removed, one house at a time, and being replaced with $750,000 homes and up. So it's not as easy as it might seem to sort all of this code out and what the intent of everything is. But you're going to have to choose. Are you going to keep NCODs, which will allow an individual neighborhood to say, if we can kind of keep things in scale, maybe my house it's worth $200,000 or $300,000, and maybe my heirs will sell it to a family, and they can get in the neighborhood for that amount of money and live here and improve it over time like I did. Or somebody's going to come in and get the house and rebuild it for $750,000 to $1 million. But I only have 30 seconds to tell you that I can help you with the data that can show you the difference in the rebuilds in, for example, the Fallon Park East NCOD and the rebuilds in Fallon Park, or I meant to say 5 Points NCOD East, and the Fallon Park neighborhood. The rebuilds in my neighborhood are $1 million. We're taking down another beautiful house. It's not obsolete at all. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Okay, we start the clock. Was there anybody else who wanted to speak in favor of this? The time's run out, but...
One question? One comment?
I'm breaking all our rules right now.
I just want to suggest or question if we follow what the Planning Commission suggests, I'm not going to go into approve or whatever, and we get what these folks are just saying yes for, doesn't that also help Southeast Raleigh area where it just keeps everything, people kind of like the same, their homes, the communities, the neighborhoods that they want. Is that a fair statement? Because I know we've had a lot of other issues going on with changing neighborhood, and I got it from you. You said, we don't want to change the community, the character of the community. So I just wanted to make that statement that if I'm reading it correctly, that's the way it would be.
Thank you. Okay. Now we have 8 minutes for those who want to speak in favor of denial of this. Again, if you'll come up, give your name and address for the record.
I promise not to take all 8 minutes. Good evening, Mayor Baldwin, council members. My name is Suzanne Harris. I work for the Home Builders Association of Raleigh-Wake County, 5580 Centerview Drive in Raleigh. I'm here tonight to respectfully request that you deny TC 719 infill subdivisions and recombinations. I've had an opportunity to discuss this issue in other forums. It's obviously been here for a couple of years now, but given that you all are relatively new, or most of you are relatively new, I just want to make sure that you are aware of our position. The staff, I felt like, did a good job in their summary, sort of analyzing and the potential impacts of the text change. And they stated in there, and I'll quote it, "The findings show the potential for substantial reduction to residential zoning entitlement," end quote. And that pretty much means it's a taking of land and that potential for that land from its owners. And I know a lot of times people assume that those owners are home builders or developers, but they're Raleigh taxpayers and they're often Raleigh residents, not just home builders. People who own that land, who have the potential to do something different with it, would have that potential taken away through this text change. And I also know that a lot of times people think of infill development and automatically think inside the Beltline and think about the expensive land right inside the Beltline and what that might mean for the price of the home. I can't guarantee that if someone purchases a piece of property inside the Beltline and has the potential to subdivide that the two homes built on there would suddenly be less costly in a price tag than the home that was there previously. But I can tell you that after you looked through the presentation that was done by the staff and how onerous that process is for figuring out what your lot size could be, that will add to the cost of a house, for sure. You will lose housing affordability by adding layers and layers of regulation to the process. So that, please take that into consideration as you're considering this text change. The HBA does not support, obviously, this taking of land, especially when it comes down for the purpose of uniformity. We think that the potential diversity of different lot sizes for infill development and the greater density and the opportunity for all types of housing that it can provide is worth considering. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I have one question. Seem to recall this from my days on council, and I'm not sure if it's correct or not, so I'm going to ask the question. 25% of the cost of a house is regulatory. Does that still hold?
That is still, I would have to find the exact number for you, but that is the percentage that has been quoted from a North Carolina, no, sorry, a National Association of Home Builders study that was done, and that was on a national scale. And I could find out for you if there's anything more regionally that we could provide.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a question, and actually, this is a staff question, I think. So, wait. Sorry, I just realized. Okay. Question for staff: is a text change like this something that it has been proposed or adopted in other cities? And if so, what is the result of said adoption? It's just my understanding that most cities are going in the opposite direction. And so I find it interesting that we're proposing that this is sitting here when I'm reading that most cities are doing the opposite, that's all.
I have not conducted any research personally for to find out if any other jurisdictions have done this type of infill, adopted these sort of infill regulations. I would have to assume it has been done somewhere, but I could do the research and get that information to you to find out if there are any other comparative jurisdictions that have adopted this type of regulation.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anybody else here who would like to speak against, wait a minute, yes, against this text change? Or in other words, in favor of denial?
Yes, clearly I am in favor of denial. My name is Richard Gephardt. I live at 1924 Carbridge Way. I live closer to 540 than I do 440. This is another example of a text change that it has unintended consequences and affects my property out in North Raleigh that may not be the target of what we are looking for. There have been several text changes passed throughout the years. There was a driveway text change passed about a year ago that affected location of your driveway to your property line, which had a far more reaching issue than they originally thought. And so I would be against this approval. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Okay.
O'Hara Powell, 1551 Atria Circle. Yes, this is crazy. He just gave you the numbers of houses that couldn't be created because of this. So therefore, that's less tax revenue. That's less to go around to do other affordable housing projects, infrastructure projects, and so on and so forth. So It's just, this is ludicrous. If this is a far-reaching what it's going to do, then the people that are for it need to pay my property taxes in order to tell me what to do on my land and pay my mortgage. Thank you.
Could you tell us how you really feel?
Yeah, sorry. I mean, it's just, there's enough government overlay anywhere.
I'm sorry, it's getting late and I couldn't help myself.
Our rules of decorum say no vulgar language now.
I have a question.
Thank you.
I have a question for staff.
Okay, we're good. Thank you, sir. Thanks for hanging and being patient. It's been a long night. Mr. Branch.
I want to say it was in November. We did a subdivision, last subdivision that we approved. Would we have been able to approve that subdivision if this text change had been in place? It was a corner lot. I want to say it was on Lane Street. It was recently.
This rule wouldn't apply in historic overlay, correct?
That's correct.
So that wouldn't have applied, but if you pulled that lot out.
So if it was not in a historic overlay district, because when we talk about the statements that were made, we had ifs and what ifs designed. So this was not in a historic overlay district. Would that have been able to be approved?
Living nearby and being somewhat familiar with the lots, I think that one probably would have been because it was in pretty strong conformance with what the prevailing lot pattern was. Because that lot was bigger, because it had had a church on it prior. But our research showed that there were, as the numbers were quoted, many, many lots in other neighborhoods where the zoning is where the lots are substantially larger than the minimum the zoning would allow, where subdivisions that have been approved would not have been able to be approved.
Okay. So there's some that we approved that we would not have been able to do if this was in place.
Yeah, they were. All those were in administrative approvals. I mean, the thing that you saw was a very rare circumstance where a subdivision would be in front of the city council.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak? You've already spoken, so what is the rule on that?
If you're out of time, no. If you've set that time limit, I mean, you have discretion on that, on the text amendments.
I see 2:13,
I think the time is up.
She's out of time.
Yeah.
We've run out of time.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Carol. All right. We're going to close the public hearing and bring this back to the table. So does anybody have any questions of staff?
I've asked mine.
Okay.
I don't have questions. I'd like to make a statement, but I can do it after there's a motion and second, if that's appropriate.
Is there a motion?
Yes. So first, I want to just address the folks who are in favor of this text change to say that I think we want the same thing. I don't think we're on opposite sides of this. I think it's just how we're viewing it. And so when I say that we want the same thing, I think we all want thoughtful growth that includes affordability. The difference here for me is that if we focus on keeping things the way they are, then we only keep them affordable for the people who already have them. So I think we've got to move forward in a way that creates an abundance of diverse housing options, and I think that's something this council is very much committed to doing in addressing missing middle and thinking about duplexes and triplexes and cottage courts. And in addition, the Growth and Natural Resources Committee is going to be bringing the NCOD tool up and looking at it at our January 28th meeting. So I want to make sure that the conversation keeps going, because I think we've been thinking we're all at an impasse, but I don't think we are. I think we've got to move through this moment, though. And so with that, I am going to move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated January 7th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to deny the zoning text amendment.
And I'd like to say something, Mayor.
Yes.
I would just like to say that I want to make it easier to build and to increase our housing supply, and I believe that this proposed text change is going to make it harder. I'm in favor of infill. I'm certainly in favor of appropriate infill. If a property owner chooses to subdivide their land, I hope that they would build a duplex or triplex instead of a McMansion. That would be my preference. So let's vote this down and then work to allow more housing choices citywide in more residential zoning districts.
May I just add to that? Most of our policies right now actually encourage the construction of McMansions. As we move along and start looking at policies that encourage the full spectrum of housing, something we'll be looking at and I'm sure we'll be engaging in. So having said that, there's a motion on the table in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for being here and bearing with us. And now for the last item is text change 1319 building height. And Travis Crane is here to speak to us from the staff. Thank you, Travis.
Thank you. Good evening. Travis Crane in Planning and Development, here to present TC 1319, which is a text change that would modify building height in our mixed-use district. So this text change does primarily two different things. It removes the height cap for the measurement of feet for buildings that are 7 stories and above, and then clarifies that structured parking counts towards the maximum number of stories. That language is not contained in the code today, so that clarifying language would be added. This is coming to you as a recommendation from the Planning Commission. They reviewed this in November of 2019, and they recommended approval 8-0. However, there is a fair amount of history that's associated with this text change. I know that it's got a 2019 number with it, but this actually started a bit ago. So I'll walk through the history, if that's okay, just to kind of reset where we've been, because there has been a lot of discussion about these regulations. So this started out in October of 2016 as a petition of citizens, where a few members came forward and petitioned the City Council for this change. And the topic was referred to the Growth and Natural Resources Committee. And the committee took up discussion in October 2017, and they recommended that the topic be reviewed. So City Council received that recommendation a week later and referred it to the Planning Commission for their review. So notice there was no text change that was authorized at that point. It was just a discussion topic. It was a study that was being performed. So between December 2017 and September of 2018, the Planning Commission reviewed this topic. They actually formed a special subcommittee comprised of 5 members to take a look at this issue. And through their review, they recommended authorization of a text change that would alter the height standards for building heights for buildings that were 7 stories and above. This Planning Commission received the recommendation again a week later in October of 2018, and they had further discussion. So at that point in time, the Planning Commission recommended not only altering the height for buildings 7 stories and above, but also altering height for 4 and 5 story buildings. So just to pause for a second, and we're going to go through this in a moment, the subcommittee recommended removing height in feet for 7 stories, 12 stories, 20-story, and 40-story buildings. The Planning Commission recommended that for 4 and 5-story buildings, the measurement of feet in height be retained, but that it be increased slightly. And again, we're going to go over that in a moment. So this was delivered to the City Council in October of 2018, this recommendation was, and that was referred to Growth and Natural Resources, where they reviewed the topic again. So between November 2018 and September 2019, the Growth and Natural Resources reviewed this topic over the course of 3 different meetings, and they recommended authorization of the text change. However, they did not agree with the Planning Commission recommendation to include the 4 and 5 story building changes that was recommended from the Planning Commission. So the topic was then sent back to the Planning Commission in November 2019, where they recommended approval. So let's take a look at the issue that was studied. So whenever we bring a text change forward, I like to reset with the problem that we were reviewing and that was presented to the City Council. So the height for mixed-use zoning districts is currently measured in 2 different ways: number of stories and feet in height. And this is true for all of our height categories. And if you look at this chart, you'll see that if you apply the math equally amongst all of the stories, you see compression happening once you get to the 7-story buildings. What that means is your floor-to-floor height gets smaller and smaller as buildings get taller.
Travis, could you explain why? Just like what's happening with that?
Sure. So again, it's just a straight line. I don't know if I can go back. A straight line projection of applying the math across the different floors. So if there is a 3-story building and your maximum height is 50 feet in height, you apply equal amounts of height to each floor, and you're at, I forget the number that I displayed, 16.5 feet per floor. As you add additional stories, that number shrinks. So once you get to a point of 7 stories, then if you're applying the math equally, then you're capped at 12.5 feet per floor. And so that was the inherent problem that was discussed initially with the city council, was once you get into what was known as Class A office space, meaning much taller floor-to-floor heights, it was difficult to build within our height stories. So our Urban Design Center did a fantastic job at looking at how these regulations played out in construction, and applied not only the measurement of feet in height and stories, but also looked at the requirement for the first floor minimum. So you might know that for our building types, there is a specific minimum height for first floors. So for instance, there's for a general building, a first floor height of 11 feet from floor to the floor above. That number increases for a mixed-use building. The intention behind that regulation is to allow for a little bit more space in the ground floor for any eventual conversion in the future. So if there's a change in the occupancy or use of the space, it can be accommodated. So again, our Urban Design Center staff did some fantastic research. So they not only looked at the regulations that we have, they looked at construction type, they looked at other cities and did some fantastic peer city research, and helped us in reporting with the Planning Commission. So I mentioned that the Planning Commission formed that special subcommittee. They took a couple of different points of review, and they looked at and really focused in on the 7-story breakpoint. So if you remember back to my chart, you remember that's where the point of compression started to happen. And so they looked at instances where 7-story zoning was adjacent to residential, for instance. So they wanted to ensure that there was not going to be a large impact on single-family residential neighborhoods. And so we looked around throughout zoning in the city, and they felt comfortable in that making that change, there would not be a severe impact on single-family zoning. So I mentioned the first point of review was the subcommittee. And they made some initial changes. They, again, started at the 7-story limit here. Initially, their thought was increase the measurement of feet in height for that zoning district. And then remove the feet in height for 12-story, 20-story, and 40-story buildings. Once this went before the Planning Commission, they made a slight change here. And their recommendation was, well, let's just remove the feet in height at 7 stories. And the Planning Commission agreed with that. And then let's also take a look at these other 2 height categories at 4-story and 5-story and increase the height slightly. So a 4-story building would go from a maximum of 62 feet to a maximum of 68, and a 5-story building from a maximum of 75 feet to a maximum of 80 feet. So again, that was the Planning Commission review at that time. So when the text change was ultimately authorized after Growth and Natural Resources review, this was the text change that was drafted. So here we see 7-story buildings all the way up to 40-story buildings, no measurement of feet in height, with no change to 4- and 5-story buildings. So that's the ordinance that's in front of you tonight. Finally, I touched on this point at the beginning. There would be language added here that that contemplates structured parking as a story that would be counted. That's not something that's in the code today, so this would be a welcome addition from staff's perspective. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
It was very thorough. Does anybody have questions for staff, for Travis?
I do. I noted in the background materials we have in our packet, it seems like Raleigh's unique in this type of regulation. But you didn't say how many cities you surveyed. You said among the cities you surveyed, Raleigh was the only one that regulated height in both number of stories and feet.
Right.
Have you cast a wider view, and can you tell, are we truly an outlier in this regard?
That's true that the way that the city measures height today, or classifies height today in our mixed-use zoning districts, is different from our research. And we looked across the country. It wasn't just in the state of North Carolina. From total number, I don't recall. In my mind, it was somewhere around 8 to 12 different cities that we looked at. There were some within the state, like Charlotte and Greensboro. There were others outside of the state. I believe we looked at places like Denver and Austin, other comparable cities. And what we found was that oftentimes for very tall buildings, that cities used floor area ratio as a measurement of maximum building bulk and height, which is a different type of tool that's used. So we were, and again in our research, the only city that used both feet and height and maximum number of stories for very tall buildings.
Travis, follow-up question. That was incorporated into the UDO. And did that come from the consultant we hired or was that something we had always done?
No, ma'am, that was new in the UDO. So you might remember in the previous zoning code, height was measured very simply. The zoning districts allowed a maximum cap on height in places like the downtown and other special areas of the city. You could gain additional height beyond 75 feet if you asked the city council. So that's why you saw a lot of site plans that came forward to the planning commission or city council. When we wrote the UDO, we created the height categories. Initially, the proposal was just to include number of stories because from staff's perspective, it's fairly simple for a layperson to stand at a building and count the rows of windows and understand that you're looking at a 3-story building or a 4-story building. It's a little bit more difficult for someone to understand what a 75-foot tall building looks like or what a 50-foot tall building looks like. So the initial proposal was for just height in number of stories. The measurement of feet, that upset limit, was added later during the drafting process.
By staff?
It was through conversations during the public adoption process, yes, ma'am.
So that directive then came through council?
I can't recall if it was planning commission or council, but one of the two bodies.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have questions for Travis? Okay, if there's anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this text change, please come up. But I'm also going to ask, is there anybody here who would like to speak against this text change? All right, we'll start with in favor.
Good evening, Joe Whitehouse, 6109 Iris Drive, Raleigh, North Carolina. And first off, Happy New Year and Happy Decade to everybody.
Thank you.
Mayor and council members, Scott Cutler and I, right here, were the citizens that made this request. We've passed our 3rd birthday on this. We're working on our 4th year. It has gone through a rather long, extensive process, as staff has done a good job on outlining tonight. It has created a lot of issues. It was unintended. The height was added toward the very end of the UDO, and I think it did come from council, if memory serves me correct. And so I think it was done without thinking about what really were going to be the consequences. As staff has reported, there's no benchmark city out there for us at all that has both stories and height. It just is impractical. Nobody else is doing it. We shouldn't be doing it. I'm going to be brief. I know it's been a long night. I'm happy to answer any questions. We brought forward a tremendous amount of industry information on this subject over the last 3+ years, and would really like to know that this could be finalized tonight and get approved. Thank you.
Just think how long Old Town has been going on. It's, yeah.
Scott Cutler, 1428 Van Page Boulevard, Raleigh. I think when the feet in height limitation was put into the UDO, there was a fear that people might just arbitrarily build much taller buildings. And so there was a sort of belt and suspenders approach to, limiting the number of stories and that height in feet. I would say that if anyone is concerned about that happening, they need to understand, first of all, while there is a marketability and an aesthetic advantage to having gracious floor-to-floor heights on the ground floor of urban buildings because you want retail and restaurant opportunities, there's a powerful economic disincentive to having taller floor-to-floor heights above. You need enough to make the building work, and really all we were asking for is if you're allowed to build 20 stories, you can build 20 stories, but you need those floor-to-floor heights to work. But the very first thing that a developer or a contractor or a designer does is look for ways to compress the building because it's too costly to build otherwise. So anyone who's concerned about buildings getting too tall, just remember that there's a powerful disincentive economically to doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak in favor of this?
Could I ask a question of one of those two gentlemen?
Yes.
I don't care which one it is. And maybe we just heard this and I missed it. When this started out for you all, did you have a position on the 3, 4, 5-story height issue and whether the building height regulation ought to apply in that context?
We did, but that wasn't our principal concern. Our principal concern really was with urban buildings, and so 3, 4, and 5 was of less concern to us. It does make sense to us that if you could add 5 feet to the height of those, not taking the limitation off entirely, we would be in favor of that. But that wasn't our principal concern when we came forward.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else in favor? Okay, anyone opposed? Sir?
Mark Senior, 405 Kinsey Street. Appreciate your commitment to the community and staying this late. Apologize for making you stay even later. I was a little remiss in not talking about this issue earlier, but I just found out about it today. And I just wanted to point out a couple of things to the group before you made a decision on this. One, I wanted to point out that the proposed text change may have a far greater impact than what one would be led to believe by looking at the backup material. And reading through that, staff indicated there was only 6 instances they could find where residential development was directly adjacent to 7-story and above. And I was surprised to find that the community I lived in, Boylan Heights, the historic district, is what I consider directly adjacent to a 7-story zone property that we've been involved with recently. And I think it comes down to what the semantics of directly adjacent are. In our community, that directly adjacent is across the street, and that may not fall as directly adjacent into what they reviewed, but to me, a street in 50 feet isn't much of a difference when you're looking at a 7-story building next to a single-family residential structure. So I'm thinking there may be other instances where there are communities that are residentially zoned that are relatively close to 7-story zone properties that will be impacted by this text change that were not identified as part of that research into that. I also wanted to point out that in our community, that 7-story zone property was recognized that there really needed to be a transition to that adjacent historic residential property, and both the comprehensive plan and the future land use map reflect a recommendation of 2 to 4-story transition zoning between that residential and that within that property. So the existing zoning already is in conflict with the future land use map. And if this zoning change is adopted, it should allow for a greater inconsistency with that future land use map and comprehensive plan, which I don't think which is what the intent of the council is. So I wanted to point that out, that there may be 2 things within that text change that aren't really pretty evident in looking through that backup material. Again, appreciate your time and your commitment to listening to my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here to speak?
This is just a quickly technical question.
Carol, can you speak into the microphone,
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry. Technical question on one of the charts. Is it residential maximum height? Is it 50 feet, 45 feet? Is there a mistake there or a change? I can't refer, it was all flashing so fast up there, but I believe the residential, I just want to make sure that there's no change in whatever, if it says, I think it says 50 feet and it should maybe say 45 feet someplace. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Actually, this, and I think what Ms. Majors is referring to is the height maximum in residential zoning districts. That's unchanged with this text change. That would not increase beyond 40 feet. That's the maximum today. Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
I may have seen something go by on the chart.
Right. But this is only related to mixed-use zoning districts, not residential.
Okay.
Mhm.
Even if I saw it wrong, it's not going to change anything.
That's right.
It's already true.
That's right.
For my clarity, can you address the comments that he made?
Sure. And I apologize, I don't know specifically the property Mr. Senior is referring to. I know neighborhood you live in, though. Yeah. I will admit that the research that was done by the Planning Commission subcommittee occurred more than 2 years ago. So there might be an instance where additional 7-story heights have been mapped adjacent to residential neighborhoods. I believe that when the Planning Commission was reviewing these instances, they were not considering something across the street as being directly adjacent. So it was something that a common property line where it touched. That's what they considered as directly adjacent.
Okay.
Okay. No other questions? All right, we're going to close the hearing. Any questions of staff? Okay, I'm actually going to make a motion to approve this text change. I was on the council. I remember when Mr. Whitehouse and Mr. Cutler came forward to make this request. 3 years later, we've lived with this uncertainty. So I'm making motion to approve, and then I will have a second motion after that.
Madam Mayor, can you read the consistency statement?
Whatever the consistency statement is.
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated
I-
January
I'm
7th.
having trouble because of my glasses.
Yeah, I was going.
Here, you read it for me. I can't read with your glasses.
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated January 7th, 2020, contained in the agenda material, and to approve the zoning text amendment.
Second.
You're laughing, but when you're 63, you won't be laughing anymore.
I'll lose mine.
Yeah, okay? Yes, I just went and got new glasses. They're not ready yet, so bear with me. Okay, thank you for
second.
reading the consistency statement, coming to my rescue, sir.
No problem.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The second motion, I would like to send to GNR for study and discussion, adding the 4 5-story changes. It's a motion. Do I have a second? Yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay. Passes 7-1. Folks, that is it. Thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for coming out tonight. And thank you for engaging with our city. We appreciate it.
She just has to say where.
Happy 2020, everyone.
Madam Mayor.